solar ordinance workshop. So is there anywhere anyone wanted to start at in particular, or are we just gonna take a look and kinda discuss some of the ordinances that we have on hand to kinda look at and determine where we wanna go?
Yeah, I admit that I kinda read through that, but I still don't really know a good
Do you
direction.
have any thoughts?
Trying to.
I bet he does.
Yeah, I have some thoughts, but, yeah, I'll kind of get it kicked off and whatever direction you wanna take it, I'm happy to speak on anything.
Well, I mean, we had kinda talked about just going through some of the other ordinances and saying whether we liked or didn't like certain things, or how we wanted to structure it, so. I don't care if we start with that, or if anyone wants to give their opinions or questions. I mean, we got a couple members of the public here, I don't know if they got any input or whatever, but.
If you'd like, I could introduce myself, I've got some materials I'd like to share with the board.
Sure, if you wanna come up here,
Sure.
yeah, introduce yourself, pass some stuff out.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about it. My name's John Huff. I'm a project outreach manager with Mid-American. Granted, we don't have a proposed project in Kossuth County at this time, but still, part of my job entails me going throughout the state where counties are discussing solar ordinances and weighing in on those, just since it's something I work with a lot, and make a good balanced, workable ordinance benefits everybody, not just Mid-American, not just power companies. Frankly, I think it benefits all the citizens of Iowa for a number of reasons. I have some folders I kind of put together. These are all third party, my business cards in there as well. I'll kind of just briefly touch on what's in there, just some good resources for solar information. Have one as well if you'd like.
One more for Carter here.
Sure.
He's online.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But yeah, I know, I guess it would help me if I knew what some of the main concerns that you had were, because there's a variety of information here. I mean, you got, the first page just talks about like farmland in Iowa, kind of what solar is taking up now, and if all the proposed projects throughout the state go through, what that's gonna look like. I know that's a pretty common concern that people have. They don't wanna take good farmland out of production. What I will say is, if every project that's proposed right now gets approved, it's gonna look like 0.14% of the farmland in the state. We're talking, you know, what, 0.1% basically, farmland. And even with that said, the farmland that is getting used, I can't speak for every company, but I will say Mid-American is committed to, certainly with all of our currently proposed projects, we're planting good pollinator seeding mixes underneath the panels. You know, a lot of people say you can have stone under the panels. We're not. We're gonna, you know, seed it well, and basically, really, these solar projects we have are planned to be in operation for 30 years, for example. That's 30 years where that land is gonna be able to get a good break. It'll benefit, like I said, pollinators, which will benefit the neighbors that are farming. And yeah, so it's really not too much different than CRP or just some kind of conservation project there, where these projects are pretty easy to decommission. In fact, I would go as far as to say they're the easiest to decommission solar projects are. So when you're done with it, if, you know, let's say we decide to go a different direction in 30 years, you just pull them out of the ground. I mean, that's really what most of that is. So like I said, that talks about the ag stuff on the page, first page, and we certainly take that seriously. I mean, my background's in agriculture. I definitely wouldn't promote solar if I thought it was going to be a antagonizing thing to ag in the state. This just kind of gives a little overview of solar in Iowa as it exists. There's certainly a lot more wind energy capacity in Iowa right now. The good thing is that solar is very complementary to wind. So, you know, I don't know what the overall number of megawatts capacity for wind is in the state. I think Mid-American has like 7,700 megawatts. So by comparison, Mid-American has right now 141 operational megawatts of solar. So you got 7,700 wind for us, 141 for solar. So basically what I'm saying is, there's a lot of room for solar development. We've had computer modeling that has suggested that solar would be really good to help meet the, energy demand. And the energy demand is constantly rising at an incredible rate, and solar is, really a great solution to meeting some of those shortfalls, especially because during the summer, solar's high, wind is low. In the winter, wind is high, solar is a little bit lower. So they really play off each other well. Then the third thing I got in here, this is, Mid-American actually made this. This is just the components of a typical solar project. I know for the projects we typically develop, there's a substation involved that we would construct along with the project. But yeah, just talking about, you got the panels themselves. They go through, the electricity goes through the inverter to go from alternating current to direct current, goes through the transformer to step up and go out into the transmission system. So the back side of that sheet has some of the components of the actual solar panel. And so yeah, even on cloudy days, you're looking at, you could generate up to 410 watts of power. So even when there's some clouds, it's still a pretty good thing to have. Then there's one page I won't go too into detail on, just talking about like the materials that are in solar panels. And again, so the only thing that's not a third party source in here is this sheet that we made. So everything else is like somebody else did this just about solar in general. We got American Clean Powers in here, we got Center for Rural Affairs in here, just different things. But yeah, some of the materials in solar panels, in case you're concerned about, for one thing, I'll say the panels are pretty durable. I mean, they're built to be in operation for 30 to 40 years, so they're not gonna just break easily, and then the materials that are in them are really not as concerning as most people think, I don't believe.
They're not as unrecyclable as what the windmill materials are. So that's a lot of the issues with the windmill materials is can't recycle those. So that's not the case with these, or is that the case with these, with the materials?
I think that they're pretty recyclable. I mean, I can't say that every single component of it, I know off the top of my head if they are, but I know that that's our plan, is to recycle them for Mid-American. And honestly, same thing with the wind is getting better. I mean, obviously we're not talking about wind today, but as technology evolves, it's getting a little bit easier to recycle those too. But yeah, no, solar is by and large recyclable. I can say that pretty confidently. And then lastly, this is probably this has wind siding in it too, but I just wanted to give you the whole packet. Really, obviously we're talking about solar siding. As far as like setback recommendations, we don't ever really give a hard number ourselves. There's a lot of things to consider, of course, and that's your prerogative to set those setbacks, but this gives an idea of what some pretty workable balance ordinances would have as far as setbacks from non-participating dwellings, property lines, rights of way, all that stuff. So I can kind of give you a point of reference. I mean, I'll just sum it up to say all this. This is just to give you information, but there are counties in the state that, and I won't name them, but that their goal is to be prohibitive to solar. They don't want it. There are other counties that are welcoming of it, and you can see that reflected in the way that they write their setbacks and the way they write their height restrictions. We don't really have a lot of problem with, I'd say we have no problem with decommissioning plans. That's a great thing. I think that should be in the ordinance. We've done road use agreements. I don't know that every county requires that or not, but we do them. So there's different components. I just would encourage you to consider. I'll just kind of wrap up my speech here with this, and then I'll take any questions. But Governor Reynolds is encouraging Iowa to take an all of the above approach to electric generation. Mid-American certainly aligns with that totally. We do have a couple of different types of generation we're doing, but solar is one of them that is going to be really helpful because, the demand is far outpacing the ability to meet that demand right now. So we got a county where we're doing natural gas combustion turbine. We got counties where we're still doing wind development. And we got a lot of counties right now that we're working with solar on, because that solar is going to be a big thing over the next decade, and rightfully so. So I just encourage, and then lastly too, if you want to look at that amount of land that you want to be used for solar, I don't know that I've seen an ordinance that's done this yet, but if we were able to use 1% of ag land in the county, that'd be enough. It really would. So when people are worried about the land, you know, they're afraid their whole county's gonna get covered in solar panels. And if that was a legitimate fear, you know, like that could happen, I would get that. I mean, I would wanna look at that all over the county. But if you get, you know, 1%, something like that, that can accomplish the goals that we have and preserve the identity of the county. So, I mean, as you make of them, I guess I can take any question.
So typically, there's no concrete involved in erecting the solar panels, so there's no concrete footing or anything?
I don't think so, but if there is, it's minimal. Certainly not like a wind turbine, you know, built like that, that's a lot of concrete in that foundation.
This, Jacob Joliet, is that who was here before, he said that you guys typically own the land that you put yours on?
Generally speaking, I know we have a couple proposed projects that were outliers, I guess, where we did like do leases, but yeah, most of the ones that we're doing right now, it's preferred that way anyway, we'd rather do it that way, but yeah.
Question, for you there, this is Carter Nath, I'm online here. Just from Mid-American standpoint in Kossuth County, are you guys looking at projects in the county or what? I appreciate you being here, I just wondered what is your interest in being here with the county today then?
You bet. No, we don't have any proposed projects at this time, but what I will say, it benefits Mid-American, it benefits everybody for every county in the state to have a balanced ordinance that's not prohibitive. I mean, I will say this, the stuff is contagious. You know, you get a really prohibitive ordinance and the next thing you know, everybody's like, okay, we're gonna block solar. And what I'm saying is, that is a problem for meeting the energy demands in the state. If we're gonna take the all of the above approach like Governor Reynolds and others are pushing for, we can't be having counties just saying, no way, we don't wanna contribute to the solution to the problem. So, yeah, right now, not a proposed project, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out because we got a lot planned for the next decade and we're always happy to look into opportunities. But just try to be a service, I guess, and look out for the industry perspective just a little bit by and large.
Just glancing at this quickly, it seems like it talks a lot about what's not a problem, what is your biggest hurdle in dealing, other than they don't want it at all?
I think it really takes that perspective, like, yes, I agree, that's like talking about it's not a problem. I think that's important to have that perspective, because I think, I've been in county meetings where the main topic was the ag land. They just really, that and some people think, they're like, oh, it's ugly, I don't wanna look at it. Well, there's screening solutions you can have for that, you know, that's something you could have in your ordinance, or it's something that could be in a conditional, I don't know how you do your permitting here, whether it's a conditional use permit or whatever for the construction of the project. You can require that in the permit, certain screening requirements, so if you wanna plant evergreen trees at parts of the border that are super visible, you know, but basically to answer your question, some people think they're ugly. Some people are concerned if they break what those materials are they gonna get in the soil, are they gonna get in the water? I don't see that as being a super likely scenario, to say the least. What are some of your concerns, I guess, and I'll answer them honestly.
Okay. I don't have very many. My background is farming, and if somebody wants to put their land in, I guess I would appreciate that, you know, some solution to tile going through a property, protecting the tile that goes through the property. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of concerns about what they'll do.
Sure.
Me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the tile aspect is one thing that I've talked about several times, and I think it's not only the crossing and the usage of the land during construction, I think it's the long-term viability of the system and how the neighbors are able to use that system as well, whether it be through a future improvement project or any major repairs that need to be done, or even smaller repairs. I think we have to have a big enough setback that you could comfortably do a improvement project, which is getting more and more common in this county. So, I mean, if we look at some of our bigger projects now that are 3/4 and 1 inch drainage coefficients, you need a certain amount of space to be able to build something like that, so I think that's probably something that we need to go a little bit above and beyond as far as the long-term aspects of a project like this. If it's supposed to be in use for 30 years, I don't think you guys wanna take your panels down for us to put a tile system in, so.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. There probably is a solution, you could probably work that into the ordinance, I would think. I could take that back to the office, what you're saying, and see what they say about it, and send you an email about what they think, if that offers any.
Sure. I don't know, if that's kind of been the biggest thing on my radar. Of course, everybody discusses setbacks from
yeah,
other
my
neighbors and stuff, but.
thought about the setbacks is, you know, there's people out there that absolutely don't want these things and, you know, that's their right too, to say, I don't want these anywhere nearby. So, I mean, we kinda have to take a little bit of that into consideration too, because they're taxpayers here in the county, so we need to make sure that their, you know, rights are protected as well, so, I mean, in discussion about setbacks, that's kinda some things that I kinda put in my brain to think about is, you know, if you got someone that's living here in the county, they've lived here, their family lives here, they're, you know, big time farmers and they don't want this anywhere near, you know. So I just, yeah, I don't know what that, you know, figure would be for setback, that would be, you know, easy for someone to, you know, handle, but.
I would offer that that's where I would really take a look at like the screening for sure.
Yep.
Because, let's put it this way, I mean, there are already existing substations, of course, there's substations everywhere. So the substation is probably, if there's a noisy part to this, for example, it's the substation. It's not gonna be the solar farm itself, the only like noise that it makes is, you know, when the panels rack and track, they call it, where they tilt to adjust with the sun. That makes almost no noise, you wouldn't even know it was doing it. I mean, sometimes you could be in the project boundary, and it takes somebody saying, hey, can you hear that? Oh, okay, I guess I do kinda hear that. It's not like, so my point being, sorry to be long-winded, I think that if they didn't wanna live near it, so to speak, I think the thing would be aesthetic. I don't think, it's not gonna be making noise, it's not gonna stink. It's gonna just be a visible thing, so
Mhm.
that's where I would look at the screening part as a solution to that potentially. I can have a seat, but I'm still willing to answer anything as you think of it.
Sure. Just out of curiosity, where do you guys get your solar panels from? Where are they made?
That's a good question, actually. I could get an answer for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Josh?
Yeah.
80% of the supply of solar panels comes from China.
Yep. Yeah, that's not to say that theirs come from China, but that's just something
I know.
I'd wanna know is, you know, yeah.
It's a good question. Thoughts?
Scott, something on your mind?
I'm always glad to be heard. I'm Scott Buchanan, I'm a retired attorney from Algona here. It's been my pleasure to work in renewable energy for over 30 years, I think, having worked on a land use agreement for the very first municipal solar farm in Iowa, just east of town here. And I've been doing.
That was wind, right?
Wind, yes, wind. Renewable. Sorry. The opportunity to host solar, I think, is a great opportunity for Kossuth County. The impact on everything from roads to visuals to noise, I mean, solar is just so much has such a lower footprint on the environment, I find it difficult to understand anyone not wanting to embrace it, particularly when you know that a landowner could be paid as much as $3,000 an acre for an easement. And I think it would be extraordinary if either a neighbor or a board of supervisors thought they could deny someone the opportunity to earn that kind of return on their investment in land. Because ultimately that's what everyone is doing, is they're getting a return on their investment in land here. Now you're just farming a different part of what comes from the sun. You know, that's what, I mean, you're farming corn, you're farming solar energy that is absorbed by a corn plant. And then you're converting that into other forms to utilize it. Well, this is just another form of solar energy being converted now into electricity, directly into electricity. It's a very efficient process. And it has a lot of benefits for the utility. I also represented AMU for my entire career, and had the opportunity to see how the energy markets work, how we satisfy changes in demand, changes in technology, changes in resources, and so forth. And solar really fits into a nice notch there, particularly, and along with wind, but particularly if we can utilize battery technology in a very efficient, cost-effective way. Because when you can couple solar with the battery, you've got demand, you've got dispatchable energy now. And you can, it doesn't matter whether the sun's up or the sun's down, you've got juice. And that's really the key to satisfying demand, is having it available 24/7. So, and I think some of you were at the program out at Iowa Lakes, Kyle, I think you were there.
Carter's online here, but
Yeah, Carter was there, and that model of hybrid solar and battery just seems like a winner all the way around. I think the concerns and I've worked with counties on their ordinances elsewhere too. I think your interests would be in decommissioning, drainage, setbacks, and battery tech, whether you want to have any comments or any input in what sort of battery technology can be placed on property. In my mind, battery technology is so new, we really don't know what it's going to amount to. I mean, is there volatility in it? Can they blow up? Will they create a permanent pollution hazard, possibly? I mean, that technology is moving so quickly. I could see a county having a legitimate interest in wanting to know what's in those boxes, because they're gonna look like semi-trailers, you know. But what's in it? And when they started showing up in wind easements, they added battery storage or energy storage to the easement language. And I said, what is that? Well, we don't know yet. So you're asking my client to permit you to put something on their land that you can't even describe to them. And so we take it out until they could specify what it is. I said, how big is it? Well, we don't know yet. What's in that box? Well, we don't know yet. So, you know, that's kind of a developing technology that I don't think you want to discourage it, but you want to have the opportunity to comment and permit something that's safe, certainly, as you go along. On the drainage, obviously if there's an existing county tile or something going through a property, you can't allow that to be built over. Other than that, I'm not sure the county has a legitimate interest unless they're prepared to acquire it. You know, if you wanna condemn an easement for prospective purposes, we might wanna extend this county tile that direction, then you should pay for an easement. You know, buy one and compensate the landowner, because if you're forcing them to give up $3,000 an acre because of your ordinance, that's quite an impact, and that could be a lot of acres. So I would be very cautious, I would urge you to be very cautious with that and with regard to setback. Something reasonable should be fine with anyone, because they're being well compensated for what they're gonna get, even if it isn't everything, even if it doesn't go all the way to the fence. But once you start carving that up and saying, well, it can't be closer than this, now you're costing them real money. And I think you would owe it to your constituents, not to do that, not to cost them much money, unless there's a very important purpose for that. And if there is, then again, it should be compensated. I think, you know, somebody says, I don't wanna see that. Well, one response to that is, too bad. You don't own it, you don't own the view unless you purchased an easement. And if you didn't, then that property owner is entitled to do whatever is lawfully permitted to be there. I don't wanna sound like I don't care, but I'm just saying, unless, you know, people often comment on things that they don't like and they don't want to see. But there's a way for you not to have to see it. You can own that view. You can buy an easement to prohibit anybody from interfering with your view. And they do it all the time in cities. But to think that you're going to prohibit somebody from putting something on a 400-acre tract of land because the neighbor doesn't like the view, I think that sounds extraordinary. So I would be very conscious, or very conscientious about how you consider that being a material part of your job. If the neighbor wants to buy an easement, they can do it. But it's gonna be very expensive if your neighbor is gonna get paid $3,000 an acre for a solar farm, for solar installation. So I think we have to keep some common sense and some fairness in mind there too. Mid-America has been a very conscientious developer of wind energy, in my experience. I worked with them for 20 years. And they have always, to me, demonstrated a willingness to be collaborative and cooperative with county governments. We had a good tussle with them over in Palo Alto County when I was representing the county over there. And of course, it helped that the general counsel for Mid-Am grew up in Algona. His father was my father's law partner. But it's business. You know, these guys are just trying to do business. And I think we should be helping foster that if we can. And we better have a darn good reason if we're gonna say, well, you can't do that here. That's a pretty big ask. So, good luck with it. I don't think this is I don't think it should take a Herculean effort to craft an ordinance to work in Kossuth County. These are, relatively speaking, simple compared to a wind situation. I think wind has a lot more complexity to it, a lot more hazard, a lot more impact. Solar is just kind of like, you can just get out of the way and let it happen. I'd say that might be one of the best solutions. But there are, like I said, there are several reasons you might want to have something on the books. So, good luck with that.
Nice.
if I can make one comment off what he said, that he made a good point too. It'd be a good thing probably to define what a project boundary is, cause you were talking about, do the panels go all the way to the fence?
Right.
So when you're talking about setbacks, it'd be good to define where does the project start and end? For example, if we buy a whole 400-acre piece of land, but the panels don't go within 100 foot of the fence, you see where I'm going with this? Is the fence the project boundary, or is the last panel the project boundary? That'd be something good to maybe think about in regard to setbacks as well.
Roger, you wanted to say something?
No, I just kinda, is the setbacks and the view, I feel the same as he does, you know, that if they want a different view, they need to get an easement or something that, I mean, you can, like, some people don't like you to have cattle next to them because they might get out and bother them. Well, that ain't their say, the cattle, I mean, the guy has to keep the cattle in, but in the same way, like, I've been approached to bale my corn stalks. Somebody's gonna come in, want all my corn stalks, they're gonna put up big stacks along the road, in my field, but I don't want them to have to say they can't have the stacks a certain place. They want them by driveways, that might interfere with the neighbor's view. So, yeah, when you start telling people what the view is gonna be, that's pretty tough for, I mean, if they don't own the land or anything, that's going on beyond the realm of what's happening.
I think, as Mr. Huff said, screening is what's typically used by utilities when there's an eyesore, like a substation or something. You can screen around those things, and they've been used also in wind, you know, to interdict flicker. You could plant trees or taller shrubs to try to abate the flicker nuisance, so. And that's a cost that's borne by the developer.
Carter, did you have something?
Yeah, if I can interject real quick, I see Brandon sitting in the back there. Do we wanna, just so he can get back to work or whatever he needs to do, unless he wanted to stay the whole time, but
Are you ready to
address
talk,
what
Randy?
he.
Got an update for us?
Yeah, so talking with the association president, so the only requirement for our meeting is the 24-hour notice. So to break it down for you a little bit, there was a presentation at ISAC in 2021 by Jamie Cox. He is I believe legal counsel for a firm out of Council Bluffs. And on page 41 here, it stated the assessor is the clerk for the conference board, Iowa Code 441.2. As the clerk, the assessor takes the official minutes of all conference board meetings. The county auditor, on the other hand, is the clerk of the board of supervisors. In some counties, the auditor attends conference board meetings and takes minutes on behalf of the board of supervisors, since the presence of at least two of the board of supervisors constitutes a quorum and possibly a public meeting of the board of supervisor. The county auditor's minutes, however, are recorded only for the board of supervisors' participation at the conference board meetings, are not the official minutes of the conference board meeting, and should not be published as public record as the conference board minutes. The assessor minutes are the official minutes of the conference board meeting.
Yep, and I mean, I would say that that's correct, under the law, the conference board is its own entity, and that's where I was saying before, I mean, legally, we could meet, but that's not what we've had as best practice, and that's not what we've been, intending to operate under, at least recently. So, I guess I think you're right on the legal technical standpoint, but with Carter being the chair, he would have full authority over that agenda, and I guess I would defer to him as far as anything else that way.
Well, I thought the question was as
And
far as your
budget.
budget, like
Yeah.
I thought that was what our question was,
Yeah.
when does it have to be?
April 30th, yeah, so I don't have to have it by the
So
March
it's-
15th.
Okay.
But I was approached by a conference board, mayor that wanted this meeting today. They are really concerned about not having the assessor and what direction the board is going to look to find one. So that's why the meeting was called.
Okay, well, either way, that should be communicated with the chair, so, from the sounds of it, Carter didn't know it was coming until after the email was sent out either, so. You have anything, Carter, there, or can you hear us?
Yeah, I think as far as the legalities of it, you know, to get into the technicalities, I don't think any of us thought we were doing anything illegal by having a meeting tonight. It's just, the major question, like you say, Amber, was the timeline of the budget and how pressed we were for that. And it's my understanding, yeah, in April 30th is when the budget needs to be done by, so I guess I don't see why we can't postpone it a week, and still address the concerns of the assessor position and all that, and give us time to post it on our agenda for a quorum and our best practice in that way. I don't see why that would be an issue, but, and I'd prefer it happen that way, I guess.
I would too. It's been
Yeah.
our past practice that it's been on the agenda, and for us to be able to deliberate and all be there to make decisions,
Well,
it should be, I think.
Yep.
You know, like we said earlier, you know, we put the Farm Bureau meeting or the EMA meeting or any of that kind of stuff on the agenda, that's more just for transparency, but we're not voting on anything at those meetings, and this would be something we are voting on, so I think especially it would be good to have that on the agenda.
And that's where I read the code, so it does not need to be on the agenda on your board of supervisors. My only requirement is that the agenda is posted 24 hours in advance, which it was.
Correct,
That's
but
your
your requirement as the acting clerk for the
I
company.
mean, I'm saying, as the
Yeah.
board,
But
you're acting as
I-
1/3 of the conference board.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but Carter is the chair of the conference.
Yes,
board
I get
by
that, yeah,
default
yeah.
of being the chair of the board of supervisors, so whatever direction he gives you should be, how things proceed as far as agendas and meetings, that'd be his call as chair. So,
Well, I would appreciate it if we postpone the meeting till next Tuesday evening,
Okay,
okay,
and if you need me to send out an email, Brandon, I can do that, otherwise I'll let you.
I mean, I'll send it out, but yeah, I'm gonna have to stick around, cause you know, it's kinda late in the day, so I'll stay here till 5 and see who shows up, so. And just say there's no meeting tonight.
Do you have phone numbers for people?
I do, yeah, I can call and leave messages as well, yeah.
Yeah.
sounds
I
good.
would.
Can you copy me in that email for next week's meeting so I know time and stuff?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sounds good,
Thank you,
thanks.
Brandon.
Yep, thanks.
Now, back to solar.
This one from the, get back to the top, sorry. This Iowa Solar Siting Resource Guide, the roadmap for counties, who wrote it, I don't know, but Center for Rural Affairs, Iowa Environmental Council, I gave that a good looking through, I went through a couple of the individual county ones only, but I spent a fair amount of time with this, and it seemed like they had a little bit of an agenda with the native grasses and the pollinators and all that. I wouldn't want I don't even wanna restrict somebody that much. If they wanna plant grass and gray sheep under it, you know, I don't see why that's my business, or our business either, I shouldn't say mine, but, the setbacks mentioned in here, like 50 feet from a property line and 200 feet from a residence, is that something that's workable for most situations, or?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I,
It is just, I know nobody's gonna have a completely, I mean, inherently, no human's gonna be completely neutral on anything, right? But this is the best third-party resource I can give you, you know, I can't give you a total prescription for every situation, so I just like that they give some, to me personally, what seems like reasonable recommendations on setbacks. But as far as you're right, I mean, it doesn't have to be a requirement for the vegetation or whatever you're saying, you know, under the panels. That's just, I'm just offering that Mid-American, we would do that anyway, just to try to be conscientious.
so none of yours are used for grazing or anything like that, or
Not-
dual use? Or?
Not right now, I would not rule that out as a future thing. We're always looking at opportunities for that. We've also talked with Iowa State University, has a professor who's working in agrivoltaics, which is basically, you know, growing actual vegetables and things under the panels, and so that's something that's being explored right now. But yeah, my whole point is, I can't speak for every company, of course, but speaking for my own, and we're gonna be doing a lot of the solar in the state, we do have a great deal of care and respect for agriculture, for the land, for all of those concerns. I think that's probably, if there's anybody who has a big objection to solar, it probably has something to do with the land use. So I just kind of wanted to touch on those items.
So according to our research, a 50-foot property line setback is included in a number of ordinances from Iowa's neighboring states. A 100 and 200 foot setback for residential dwellings is also common, with some ordinances at 100, some at 150, and some at 200. These distances seem workable for developers, participants, and non-participants. You guys, I mean, are individuals here thinking it needs to be more than that, or what's everybody thinking? We gotta start somewhere, right?
Yeah, I guess, I don't,
We're abandoning the whole idea.
well,
And I say abandon the whole idea, I mean the whole idea of having an ordinance, not abandoning the idea of solar.
I think the biggest thing for me is the tile aspect, and it would be primarily for existing tiles, not some new one that's dreamt up 100 years from now, but the existing facilities, I think, even if we have a tile that goes through a property, I think we probably need 100, maybe 200 foot total setback from that way, if there is heavy dirt work, construction that needs to happen, you have sufficient room to strip off your black dirt to one side, clay to the other, haul materials and supplies in and out, and just the size of projects we're dealing with now, you gotta have a sufficient amount of space there to be able to do something like that, so if there was a improvement project that was proposed and there just happened to be a solar development that was right in the middle or at the bottom of that, that would be something that could potentially impact the rest of the landowners upstream or downstream, and I wouldn't want that to be an issue, so. But even if you said a 200 foot total setback around tile, that's probably not gonna affect a huge chunk of a certain property. I mean, there are properties where it would add up. It would be, in my opinion, it'd be limited to infrastructure that's already there, so.
What's the right of way or easement now for the drainage district has over time?
Right now, for ditches, we have 115 foot right of way, which is total, so 67.5 on each side of center line. But that's a universal blanket for ditches, but there are some where there was more or less depending on the conditions at the time those facilities were established. Obviously, those are not incorporating the size and scope of some of the projects we're seeing today.
tile itself, a buried tile, what's the easement there?
I don't know if there's a specific footage for that easement, I just think it's labeled as ingress and egress of the facility or something, and that may be for ditches too, I don't, might require some more research on that, but. Yeah,
No, I mean, I agree, it's pretty important to, you know, protect the drainage and make sure that we're covered under that. As far as the setbacks, I mean, I guess just be reasonable. If we're gonna have an ordinance, we need to be reasonable. Because if the point of setbacks is so that we don't have solar, well then you need to just say we don't want solar, but, you know, I'm not saying I'm for that, but I'm saying we need to be reasonable in our setbacks.
I had to step away for a minute there. What could you, or what was just discussed, I guess?
Well, this is Amber, I just basically said that I felt, yeah, it's pretty necessary to address the drainage part of this, and, the other thing I said was, you know, in setting setbacks, we need to be reasonable, as to not prevent landowners from, you know, doing these projects if they want to. But if we're going to not be reasonable in the setbacks, I don't find having it, I mean, then we just as well say we don't want any solar, which I said that's not exactly my take on it, but I'm just saying, you know, we need to be reasonable in the setbacks.
Okay, thanks.
and I don't know if you caught what I had said, Carter, or not, but I said I think probably like 200 feet total for, kind of a setback around drainage district infrastructure, so that if there was a improvement project that was proposed or requested, there'd be sufficient room to do all the construction related activities for that. I kinda think that'd be a reasonable number, to protect the district's interest and still allow the use of the land for the rest of the property. But I don't know if you or Josh have anything for thoughts, setback wise or whatever.
Well, one thing I'm curious about is how, you know, energy storage systems, the battery storage, you know, the containment of that, how that looks, because I'm looking at, looks like, page 15 on, I believe it's Lynn County's ordinance, that they've got setbacks for the energy storage, and I'd like to see something in there for that as well, because, you know, with any type of battery, you still risk having any sort of leakage or anything like that, and that's where, you know, chemical, you know, getting into the ground or getting into the watershed and things like that, creating issues, there too. I'd like to kinda make sure that we have some setbacks established for those systems, that we don't have them anywhere near, you know, drainage districts or any type of, you know, structure like that, so if there is any, you know, bad type of battery leakage or anything like that in those storage systems, that we're making sure the water is protected around here too. And then as far as the ordinance in general, you know, you made the comment, you know, not having an ordinance, but I think we do still need to have something in there, because we need to make sure that the land is protected in the decommissioning process too, 30 or 40 years down the line, when these projects are being pulled out, we make sure that there's something in there that protects that land to make sure that it's reestablished, back to good quality ag farmland. So having stuff in there for that is, I think, is important as well, so.
I'm not debating that point at all.
Correct.
It's hard to disagree with that, but is that our problem, or is that the landowner's problem?
I think it's because with Mid-American, they'll be purchasing the land in most projects and things like that, but as that land transitions out of their hands back into ag land, I mean, do we want that potential of them just, and I'm not saying that they're gonna do this, but destroying the land to where it's not usable, I feel like we need to still have something in there to protect that land, because as it transitions back to ag land, well, if the land's destroyed, then it's essentially useless and there's no chance of, potential income on that property afterwards.
Yeah, it's
So-
theirs, in their case, it's theirs.
Right.
If they wanna destroy it, they can destroy it. If they're renting it from somebody, if they're leasing it from somebody, that somebody would have an agreement with them about what their expectations were. Somebody brought up, somebody brought up private tile, and okay, that's a good point. I don't want somebody downstream from me doing something that's good, but as somebody different, I don't even know who all these people were, I hate it when I say somebody, but if you want protection for your tile, this is not my thought, this is what somebody else said, you should have had that baked into the agreement when you built the tile in the first place. It's not up, he or she, whoever it was preaching to me that it's not up to us to protect them from that, and I don't think we would have any jurisdiction on that private tile.
No, and we wouldn't. The unfortunate side of that is a lot of those tile systems were, county or private, or drainage district or private. You're looking, a lot of the drain infrastructure in this county was put in 125 years ago, and back then, everybody did things on a handshake.
But believe me,
So-
I understand, believe me, I agree with you. If I'm here and I wanna get to there, and I wanna get to Jody back there and Scott's in the way, it's gonna be a bad situation, especially if Scott's got a solar thing, but I don't see where it's, you can't envision every contingency coming down the road, and I'm not sure it's our business to envision it. And to piggyback on that, the battery storage, are we talking about a solar farm, or are we talking about a energy storage farm? Is there a difference, or are they all the same thing, or do we assume they're the same thing? Now, again, I'm not debating, I'm asking, you're saying we've gotta consider that contingency, or?
Well, I would think so, because it's talked about in here that they would have some sort of, on-site energy storage, and that would be.
It's talked about in somebody's ordinance,
It's in the ordinance here, but Scott even brought up the, batteries are something that they've been talking about doing, even with wind energy, so it'd be,
Yeah.
not hard to assume that they're gonna look at the same situation for solar.
I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's 100 other things that are coming, yeah, okay, I just.
And on the decommissioning side of things, I think there's, whether it's wind turbines or whether it's another topic, whether it's state or federal or local regulations, I think some of that stuff is really not controversial. Even the companies understand that decommissioning plans for wind, solar, whatever it may be, it's getting to the point where some of that is pretty standard. And yeah, it's an obligation on the company, but it's not something that they're not building projects because of. So, do I think we should not have that as a requirement just because it might not be our sole responsibility? No, I think that's one of those things where we can look out for the county as a whole, but it's not it's not negatively impacting a development, that's one of those things, I mean, if you're talking a 10-mile setback from a occupied residence, well, that's not feasible under any circumstances, and say you throw the opportunity for a waiver, I've mentioned this before, and it actually is in one of the pages here, says something about waivers, having the ability to do waivers in the setbacks, and I think we should for whatever setbacks are in there. But when it comes to decommissioning plans or road use agreements or any of that stuff, I guess I would say some of that should just be standard responsibilities that we do include.
I agree with that, we got absolutely no problem with the decommissioning agreement, in fact, please do one. But it's, the only thing I'll say about the waivers, I just wouldn't use that as like a cure-all to, there are counties that will have a really prohibitive setback, and they'll say, well, you can waive it. Well, now you could be involving 25, 30 people trying to waive that, you're not gonna get unanimous agreement on anything like that, that's just, see what I'm saying? So if it's a 200-foot setback, but you can waive that sounds reasonable to me. But if, you're talking about a mile setback or something outrageous, the waivers don't even really help much, because there's so many different parcels you're gonna be touching, and two different people that are gonna have to sign the waiver, that it's just useless. Does that make sense?
To some degree, I would agree with you, but on the other hand, I think whether it's Mid-American in particular or any other company, I think a level of a setback with the opportunity for a waiver encourages the company to be responsible and be a good partner in the community, and I think that's critical, whether it's wind or solar or anything else. I think having neighbors at war with people they've been lifelong best friends with for 40, 50 years, I just don't think that's productive in the community. So I think some level of incentive or justification for proper engagement of those conversations, I think is warranted. Now, what exact number that represents, I don't have that today, but I think that can be a tool to encourage business to be done the right way, I guess.
I believe that the state has requirements when we put in for a generating certificate, because we gotta go through state things too. I don't know if it's 1,000 feet, I can't remember off the top of my head, so I'm speaking kinda candidly here. There is a requirement to at least talk to people within a certain distance of the project.
Could you find out that figure for
I
sure?
certainly can, yes.
That'd be
Because,
helpful.
and you're right to be thinking that way, that there needs to be engagement with the community and transparent, communication. I think you see where I'm coming from though. You don't want it to be that we get waivers from 28 people, 2 people say no. I mean, that's just not even democratic at that point. When you have a big enough setback, that's really what it turns out to be, is that you have 1 or 2 people overruling a whole lot of people.
Depending on what number you land on, yeah.
Right, if you have a reasonable setback coupled with waivers, that sounds like a good way to go.
Scott? Yeah, go ahead.
Is Mid-Am looking at good neighbor easements around their solar projects?
Yes, oh yeah, yeah. It's
Okay,
definitely
so
something we need to-
if you don't know what those are, there's a principal easement on the property where the facilities are. And then often in wind projects, they acquire an easement, a nuisance waiver from the adjacent properties. So that if there is some noise or some flicker or something like that, they're being compensated for it. And that's usually a half mile or a mile out.
I was gonna say, what kind of range are you targeting for that currently, do you know?
For good neighbor agreements? Ooh,
Half mile, a mile, couple.
It wouldn't be a half mile, no, the people who are immediately adjacent to the project, I guess you would say, would be the likely candidates, like if somebody's directly neighboring.
Okay, touching property lines.
Probably so, And also, a distinction to make too would be, when we're talking about like the waiver thing, it's one thing to require or encourage communication with everybody in a certain area. I think it's a different thing to require everybody's endorsement within a certain area. You know what I'm saying? I think we should talk to
You can't
everybody.
do that.
Right,
You talk to them, but you can't give somebody a veto.
right, that's
That's
really
on the
what
other
I'm.
side of the section.
So, but yeah, no, good neighbor agreements are definitely a thing, and we look at them with pretty much every project that I can think of. And be the people pretty immediately adjacent, neighboring.
And they're compensated for those. They might get 10 or 15 bucks an acre, but, they get some compensation.
And not only that, but there's certain things that are built into it, like I said, some of this stuff also doesn't necessarily have to be written as a requirement in the ordinance, but you can put it as, when you permit it, you can have certain stipulations in the permit. Like screening is a good example of that. You don't necessarily have to put in the ordinance, in my opinion, that, oh, this is the screening requirement for every solar project, but what you can say is, and you could help me out if you like the way I word this or not, but, in certain instances, the board can reserve the right to require additional screening. See what I'm saying? So if you have a situation where, if there's a solar farm that's out in the middle of nowhere, it's not even anywhere near anybody, I don't know how much sense it makes to require them to plant trees around the entire perimeter of it. But if somebody's right up on somebody's house, then that would make sense to me that maybe you'd wanna be able to screen that person from having to look at the panels if they don't want to. So it can be on a case-by-case basis. You can write into your ordinance that when permitted, there can be certain requirements in that permit, like screening.
Are you contemplating this, using a special use permitting process for this? That's been the model for other counties. And that's where it's the special use permit that gives you that access to each individual agreement to add site-specific terms.
I don't know if I have a hard answer on that, I know that's some of the variation between some of the other ordinances that we looked at, some use special conditions.
Special use permit, yeah,
Special use
it's
permit.
just
Some-
so much
some
more
don't.
flexible and, it really gives you a role, you or whoever, you're using for the permitting process. It might be your board of adjustment. So you don't even, so the board doesn't even have to deal with it. Also, bonding for the decommissioning is something that's been customary in the wind. And that's where you get the security on restoration of the soil and, removal of all facilities. It's by having that decommissioning obligation bonded.
Any other thoughts or questions here today?
I don't think so. We're not really looking to make decisions, it's all part of
Yeah, it was
conversation and getting some good input, and appreciate you
Good
guys
conversation.
coming in and talking with us and giving us some good constructive input, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And as far as follow-ups, you want me to see what the requirement is currently for the state for notification of neighbors, right?
Yep.
And within a certain range.
Yep.
What else do you want me to follow up on? I can ask the office what they think about what you're saying about the 200 feet from a drainage district, and just, not to say that we're gonna tell you what to do, I'm not saying that, but like, we can
Yeah.
offer our feedback on that topic and see if that sounds like, oh yeah, we know this county did that, and we're great. Anything else that you want me to kind of feel out and report back on?
That is just something I was curious about, and you don't need to email everybody, just where you guys get the solar panels and stuff from.
Sure, I'll check it out.
Manufacturer.
Yep.
You got it.
Any other last minute words of wisdom?
Going once, twice. Okay.
Bravo, I'm glad you guys are looking at it.
not an overnight deal, that's for sure.
No,
No.
It's coming though, man, I'm telling you. I used to have a steady flow of wind easements across my desk, and it's completely shifted to solar. I mean, the majority of what we look at now are solar easements, solar projects, and not wind.
When is the 9 months up? We talked about that, but I didn't know.
it was June sometime, I can't remember the exact date, but I know it was in June.
October 1 is when it started.
So what kind of timeline, I mean, what's the next step? What, you say, okay, we've heard enough about this today, let's move on. When are you gonna move on to? What are you gonna do and who's gonna do it?
Well, I think our next step would be to discuss and establish what we want as setbacks and, you know, decommissioning protocols, things like that. And once we kinda have that established, then we need to work with an attorney to basically draw that up and then so on down the path of approving it and doing, public hearings on it and essentially signing the ordinance in. So, I mean, that's the long process of it, but I think our next steps would be to, discuss what we want and agree upon what we want for, setbacks and other contingencies, so.
When are we gonna do that?
It's $1 million question.
Yeah. Well,
Carter, you got any insight or timeline?
It's on, we really didn't do a whole lot of anything here. It's on the agenda and we really didn't do a whole lot of anything.
well, it was on the agenda as a workshop to
Workshop.
gather information and then we can kind of take that to, you know, put our thoughts together and come back to the table and each of us, you know,
Okay,
whether we come back with, you know, this is what I wanna see the setbacks as, do you guys agree with this, what do you got, and, you know, I think that's kind of our next step for our conversations for this. Carter, you were gonna say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, if we're looking to move forward with an ordinance, it would be better to do something sooner than later, so, cause the moratorium runs out. Not that we can't extend it, but it'd be better to just get it done.
Yep.
I realize things move slow for a reason.
Yeah.
You want time for thoughts and time for ideas to come forward.
Yeah, it's a lot of information that you gotta take in and put thoughts down and so it's.
Yeah, I'm not saying rush through it, I'm just saying, we have a moratorium and
Right,
we've had it since September and we're just starting conversations, so, I guess, I'd be sometime maybe you wanna come back in a couple weeks, or when is the board thinking?
Well, I guess some of it we have to kinda, whether it's using one of these other counties' ordinances as a template, or what, we have to figure out kind of the structure of how we're gonna, implement this, and that was touched on before, whether it's a special, use permit, or whether it's the board of supervisors actually voting on stuff, that's one of the things we talked about with wind ordinance. We have to make a decision on how that stuff is going to function, how that's gonna be handled with the county. If we're basing it off of another county's template, which one are we using? If we do that, then we can maybe talk about what numbers, what setbacks, stuff like that, but. Yeah,
That's too bad.
And the drainage.
and the drainage part. So, part of that too is hearing back from you about about some of the answers for that too, so if we can kinda hear back in the next week on that, that'll kinda give us some more information to discuss, and I would say, I'm in line with Carter, let's, give it 2 weeks, come back and hopefully we'll have a little bit more solid numbers and have a better discussion on what our ordinance will look like, so. do we wanna schedule it as a workshop again, or do we wanna,
Well, I think it kinda has to be,
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, we can't,
Yeah, we need another workshop.
okay. Let's. We're coming up, that'll be in March 4th, so what is, if we schedule it for 2 weeks out, then we're looking at March 4th, today's the 18th. What does March 4th look like schedule wise?
I don't think there's anything.
Nothing on there.
not much, yeah.
Do we wanna shoot for an afternoon again,
Whatever you guys wanna do.
1 o'clock?
I mean,
Put it on the agenda
let's
for 1 o'clock and,
maybe plan on one unless our agenda looks light, then we could
Yeah.
do it in the morning, I don't wanna
Yep.
have to come
Yeah,
back.
like say we're done at 10, we, you know,
yeah, obviously don't take a 2-hour break and come back at 1, so.
yeah. then
Yeah, we'll
we
just
can move it up.
tentatively put it for 1 o'clock on the 4th for another solar ordinance workshop. Does that work for you, Carter?
Works for me,
Cool.
Maybe you won't be sick that day.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
Alright, well then I think, with that, we are ready to move on into budget discussions.
Can we take a quick break?
Yeah, let's, take a quick 5-minute break here.
Thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the information.
You bet.
Set your grade and then put it that night, just like that, and then put your rock.
I have nothing, well, I do have something specific in mind, but somebody was talking about, you prefer to work with a level situation, or the hills, it doesn't matter, or?
Yeah, you have to level it out.
Pretty level. So you're gonna look for a level place to start with, but.
Ideally, yeah. Then we should, I mean, when you're looking at a solar project, you kind of have a nice, as level as possible ground. You gotta have access to, a transmission line that has available capacity. Trying to think what else you're really looking for, sites like, you wanna have it where there's some natural screening that already exists, that's nice. So there's already some trees and stuff.
So for the screening, I mean, if this is the solar panel and I'm out here, you want to plant something that doesn't get over, what, 15 feet, 20 feet tall, so you don't shade it, right? Or is that not a concern?
I don't know how much of a concern it ends up being, to be honest, like, the height of the trees makes a big impact. That's just
This is very specific.
Started out here, a third of a megawatt or something like that. These other ones, yeah.
Grassland down
Yeah.
here.
I don't know what
It's
they
down,
do.
it's down in the river boundaries. So they don't want to go over there because the sun.
No, they're,
Over the horizon until
Can't say.
8 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock. Is that legitimate? You hate to lose an hour, but.
Might be, I don't know, there's you know, I do outreach for projects, I review plans and things like that.
I've reviewed these.
We do have engineers who probably be able to answer that.
Project.
Yeah, that doesn't, that's a very specific.
No, I know.
Specific question.
It's a good question.
One other guy brought up that, you know, why aren't they using my farm, it's not as good a farm ground, but it's hilly, you know, and if you need something level, which evidently sounds preferable, that answers that
And no
question.
matter what.
Yep. No, I think you guys asked very good questions, very professional. I appreciate it. It might be next time, might be Jake who has to.
I know there's a reason government is small, I know there is. It's around the time. So somebody generated that bait, that's like a native banana, I don't, you know, it's an idea about
Well, it is nice to be in a room where I'm just, and I have this every situation where I can just offer opinions and thoughts without there being one big rush to get a project on hold or something. That's what really gets me, is oh my gosh, we got a project that's in a queue where we gotta get approved and all this kind of stuff, and the ordinance is holding it up, that's what really scares me. Unfortunately, we're not in that position.
Not right now, but we might be in 4 months.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Have a good one. Thank you.
No, I here.
Well, we
Yeah, that's fine, let me know if I can do anything else.
What's your name with the Scott Buchanan?
John Doug Miller, John.
Time's
He's
up.
the county zoning administrator, so that guy now, but I was kind of attending and trying to help him out.
How much?
So, yeah, 640.
I know.
Energy that day.
You know, I thought you was perfect, we come in and you welcomed us and thanks us for coming in.
Did you see my note I sent
Oh, I
you in my attachment there? On the expense page.
That you wrote on there? I'm just trying to pull it up now and it's taking forever.
Well, because we're a service call.
Cause I never really hear after the fact that nobody complained.
Yeah, I'd say the smallest one.
I think
We have some of this, we have anywhere from
Don't ever shut it off, we leave it on all day.
I think some of those were.
Oh, well, I think I shut it off
Early on.
we were breaking for lunch.
So this was at 60,000 for the dispatch center?
Big.
So I just questioned that as far as this expense code, this 01040, that's
Like in
under,
our near-term plan.
I don't know what that is, because my code
The
is
smallest
still
would be
under.
as big as.
It's probably under law enforcement or something, so.
Because this is gonna be an expense to me that gets paid to the city of Oklahoma, not to the law enforcement.
I was trying to get all the way.
Right, but if it's still, it's probably out of the same thing that we did for the elections. So it's set up the same way as what the election says is set up.
So will this code come out of my budget then or not?
The 26,000 is what comes out of
So
your,
what's the 1200 then?
that's just ambulance, that's just a function code.
That's a function code, so this function code doesn't make a difference.
No, it just determines the service area, that's the service area that it comes out
Yeah,
of.
there's requirements for how much.
Oh,
Work.
so that shouldn't come out of my service area.
Yes, it comes out of your service area.
Okay, so you're okay with that? I won't question it any further than that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it still could be changed because they talked about doing different, different stuff with that building, so it's possible that it could still change that number. Not the amount, but the line item number.
So that's not the election center.
No, this function code is a code that we use for the election center also because it's,
If you're good with it, I'm fine, I just
yeah,
wanted to
so,
double
so,
check that.
yeah, the state of Iowa tells us what function codes, object codes we have to use for certain things.
There should be two things that would try to make it better. I was just concerned that you misunderstood what I was trying to do and.
No,
Okay.
I don't know why this isn't.
It's
printing.
we got
This is the 20.
printouts,
Down to
Well,
folder,
south of
where did those not change?
his are in your the ones he did are in your folder.
Because all it takes
Oh, there it is, yeah, 260.
disaster and.
For as much noise as some rural residents will make after the project comes in.
And we don't have the best.
Very
some
few
of the best places do
multiple
multiple
projects
cheaper.
result in neighborhoods.
Does Doug know he's coming back up to do the self-insurance spreadsheet?
I don't know.
That also is a detriment. He also wants their money all the time.
I think we're probably about ready. We're gonna get started here in a second. Just wanted to get it.
Both.
See ya.
He doesn't wanna come up here.
I got a spot for you.
Yeah, right here.
These chairs are more comfortable.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
This isn't terrible.
See ya, thanks for coming.
Alright.
Alright, I think we're, you pulling up your sheets?
you want this door shut?
Sure.
Might not
yeah,
hurt
it might not
just in
hurt, yeah.
case the hallway gets loud.
I guess the question, you prefer it's open so everybody can come in, but it gets loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright,
Okay,
I got it closer.
I think we're,
there you go.
ready whenever you are. There's, Carter, are you back with us? Just wanna make sure you're,
I never left.
okay.
And the minutes and the budget sheets are in our folder. Alright,
So the advisory council did meet 2 separate nights. We met for excess of 3 hours, going through strictly budget and budget numbers. So I wanna thank the advisory council for the time they put into working through the numbers and coming back with a recommendation to you guys.
yeah, did everyone see those documents in the folder?
Well, I'm looking at the worksheets.
Yep. And then, yeah, there's a couple sets of minutes, which, the first one kinda outlines, some of the reasons we didn't have stuff after that first meeting. And even in the minutes, we talked about that at the beginning of the second meeting, that we discussed the day-to-day operations in depth. Jody can chime in at any point in time. But we did have some very detailed conversations about how that workload goes and how the operation as a whole is functioning. Those were just very, very detail-oriented conversations, so I do think that was very beneficial for all of us. But I guess if we wanna go through the budget, one, like the top of page 1 here, I don't know if this is Phil or Tammy's writing, but the code for that line item, is that something we need to?
I questioned that and I talked to Tammy about that, so.
You got
Yeah,
that
that's
figured out?
Phil's writing, so he was just questioning why it isn't 1200, because that's the usual ambulance. Well, it's coded because that's the law enforcement
Okay,
one, and so it's going to the law enforcement center. So I coded it, it's still under 26,000, but the function is
Yeah.
under the law enforcement center.
But that money, I believe, will go to the city of Algona, correct?
correct. At this point, yeah.
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 That'd be the same as what the sheriff does.
Yeah, it's the
Yep,
same thing.
okay. So then we got that question figured out, solved, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. I guess next we can kinda dive into staff, so we got the director's salary and the other, deputy salaries, those are obviously the two big things. With Phil's salary in particular, and Jody, feel free to chime in anytime here, but, that's some of where we talked about the workload and the day-to-day operations and how some of that functions together in comparison to the other staff and in comparison to other offices or whatnot. And that was dealt with after, dealing with the deputies, which the recommendation was for 6%. With the comparables of other services as well as, the workload and, kind of where the service is today versus where it was prior to it coming to the county. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I think we've had to iron out a number of kinks. I think we've done that fairly well, but we are in a pretty good place right now. Financially, we're in a good place. Staffing wise, we have one position open. This does incorporate, one more position, so that would get us to 10 full-time staff, so. And with the timing of when this department transferred over from the city of Algona to the county, the health insurance conversation, all that was very much priced according to what was coming over to. And there weren't any changes with the wage scale changes that some other departments and offices had been impacted by, so. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that right now, otherwise I can roll into our conversation about the director piece next. So, in regards to Phil's wage, there's two pieces of what we discussed. One, just normal raise, matching the rest of the staff for percentage, but then also our other full-time staff right now, as part of our, wage scale based on their certifications, there is an increase, with a change of certification, so like Phil's one of the ones in this class, along with the rest of the staff, where that's currently EMTs going to advanced EMTs. And because of that change in certification, we also recommended a adjustment to the wage once that is completed and once that certification is successful. So there are two pieces that way, and I don't remember, I think that was the first set of minutes it's touched on. So that certification change would be $4,160, which would be in line with the other staff adjustments. Jody, anything think I should add there? Tried to hit the highlights from a 3-hour conversation.
Just say, basically it comes down to, like you said, all the EMTs or the AMT, if they wanna be paramedics, there's wage increases per, and we thought it was fair for the director to get to follow that, because you get to bill better on the service and they're more versatile for the service, so it's not just an expense, but it's an income part of the project too.
Is that something that is, basically changing his base wage? I'm just looking at it as in the picture of like, because of how you have your, EMTs and how you have, where their certification gives them a new, basically new job title. Is
Yep.
that built into Phil's, base wage now that if, you know, Phil ever decided to leave us and don't, but if we pick up a new one, is that something that's going to be built into their base wage too? Or is that something that they would have to get their EMT to get that added to their wage? You know, is that?
The replacement would be hired at whatever the recommendation is from the board you guys approve. There's no set wage scale for that position.
Right, that's what I'm
So
kinda
if the new
asking
person you
is-
hire was an EMT, you could bring them in at a
Sure.
lower level.
And
Yeah.
some of Phil's job, unfortunately, is if we're short on staff,
He's
he
gotta
is
fill
in
it.
the truck and is the staff,
Yep.
so.
Yep,
That's sometimes what ours has to go by too, is we use him not only as a director, but he's
right.
fills multiple roles.
And I'm not speaking anything against Phil's,
No.
you know,
So
job,
that's
I'm just talking about in the
one of the
future.
things
that-
I think what I would correlate to what you're asking maybe is if that's like base versus longevity, and
Yeah,
we don't have it. I don't know that we can, and I don't know that we have the ability to stack on the, certifications onto the base, but if or when Phil leaves, because it's not an if, it's a when, whether it's tomorrow or 20 years from now, it's a when. But, I mean, regardless of whenever that position would change, the new person doesn't have to start at the same salary that he's currently at, because if there's a difference in qualifications, there should be a
Right.
difference in pay.
Right.
So it's not set in stone in that regard. I don't know. agree, or any thoughts, Jody?
You know, you look at the directors and they're anywhere from an EMT, some are paramedics, some are ex-doctors, and the wages are all over the board
Yeah.
out there, so.
And some of that correlates with the other services. I mean, it's hard to find something that really is apple to apple comparison of what we have, or, I mean.
There's getting to be more and more as these counties are passing the vote, there's getting to be more and more counties. But when I started this process in 2020, I mean, we were the first, you know, we kinda laid the road to where this thing's gone, and, besides running the service, I'm also a resource for all the volunteer services and assisting them as well, so. It's different than just the ones that are just the directors of one service.
Yep. And that's where, I mean, if you look at another county that might have 3 or 4 cities in it, if they have one town where their main location is, even if they have 2 other towns, it's not quite comparable to what we have for basically umbrella over the whole county and helping train, coordinate all those other services and volunteers, and I mean, it's critical that we keep those other volunteers engaged in the service, and I think we've been able to do that to some degree.
As time has gone on, you know, and this isn't to do with the budget, but as time has gone on, I've seen a lot more of, you know, there was a wall, Algona was Algona, and the towns were this. We're getting a lot of cross mingling of people wanting to come work here in Algona or in Sway City as a volunteer to pick up experience, to pick up hours. So we're getting a lot more blend of the county working together than just each individual community. So it's kinda nice to see that happening.
Yep. Anyone have any questions or thoughts on wages? That's obviously the big elephant in the room for the most part.
You were there, right? And so the obvious thing, and
I don't question everybody wants more money, needs more money, but everybody tripped in here individually with higher amounts on their budget, and we put everybody back to 4%. That was the message that we delivered, and I don't see how we can do this. I understand the, you know, difficulty of hiring people and keeping people, attracting people, but everybody that came in here and said, you know, we got this at 7%, other than the sheriff, you know, we said, yeah, bring it back at 4%. That's what we, and I don't understand how we're gonna do it differently here.
Emergency management got 8%, they got 4% last year, 4% this year, so they're 8%.
I have no idea, I'm sorry, thank you, but I have no idea.
Road department's getting last year's and this year's, so it's not consistent across the board. This department's brand new, started a year and a half ago. We were very conscientious of our funds, and we did build a nice fund balance right away.
And I'm nervous about our staff, because with the transition from Algona to the county, they ended up taking a pay cut to do what we did. So, and they were supposed to, we advised a raise last year and we got nixed. So there's a lot of animosity between our people. And if you look and you pay any attention, it's not just far away. I was reading my Palo Alto paper, 10,000 sign-on bonus to try to get another medic. I mean, this is a
Spencer, yeah.
big problem.
Pocahontas just put one out yesterday.
So some of it's trying to
10,000 for
retain,
EMTs.
because if you're gonna have to come up with all that money to hire somebody back, or we're short service and not providing what the county said we were going to do, and this is a weird deal that there's a levy money here. We have a separate levy, money came in, we have our inputs that we get our expense for call revenues, it's kind of an odd, to me, it's an odd situation that it's county money, but there's no county money from the Board of Supervisors per se that comes to this entity.
Well, I can understand, you know, you bring up that we weren't consistent last year, and now we're trying to be this year, and we're getting kind of criticized for trying to be consistent. So we can't have it both ways, and, I've kind of stuck with it from the whole time. I mean, we've watched people come in here, and you're not the only department to come in here and say that hiring and things like that and staff are not a problem. Sometimes it is, but we have to have a point where we can be consistent. Because now if we're not now, then we start next year off saying, well, okay, but they got 6%. So we're always chasing that. You know, my big thing was, to be consistent this year, so that everybody was on the same page. And, you know, granted, is it that way? No, 4% to somebody making 30,000 is different to a 4% from somebody making 100,000. I mean, it's different, but yet at the same time, our percentages are the same. And we did, you know, keep the health insurance the same, for this upcoming year so far. I mean, I think that's where we're staying, but anyway, you know, I think that's a good thing. I have a hard time not being consistent when we've told everybody this year we were going to be consistent. I'm not saying that, you know, more money isn't deserved. That's never gonna be my take on it, but I do feel consistency is important.
So the state of Iowa, when this essential service passed a law that said we were required to have an advisory council. And advisory council's duties per that law says they are to assess the needs of the county and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. After last year's change, and Jody can attest to this, there's I have some board members that if we change this again, are probably gonna quit. Their job is to assess the needs of the county, look at the budgetary numbers, and determine what's best for the county, or what's best for EMS for Kossuth County. They spend 3 hours looking at the budget, looking at the numbers to come up with this recommendation. I understand where you guys are coming from, but we have a council that looked at that stuff for over 3 hours to determine what they felt was the right amount.
And I guess.
If we're not gonna follow the recommendations, what's the point of having an advisory council?
Well, and as much as it might be uncomfortable to justify or defend a different thing one way or the other, that is exactly what we did. And looking at the fine details and the mechanics of how all this is operated, and it's not just at the last meeting. I mean, we've got some board members that excel in different areas than others, and I think as a group, we've discussed the nitty gritty details of the service, and I guess that's been an ongoing conversation, but we had a very detailed conversation at these last couple meetings and tried to come up with something that was reasonable and appropriate.
Yeah, I don't know, siding with these guys down here, it's hard to give, you know, 6% to one area but then everybody else gets a 4, and not saying that it's not deserved and, you know, that's never been a good question, it's,
I can tell you personally, if it's across the board, everything gets 6%, the sheriff doesn't get more. If everything's exactly 4% no matter what, I'm okay, really at that. But if somebody gets a little more here or there, this isn't a lot different than the sheriff, truthfully. This is a 24-hour-a-day gig. These guys are on call, they have callbacks, they work. It's different, but if it's all 100%, 4%, then it's uniformed and then it's okay. If you have any entity getting over 4%, you've already broken your own rule of consistency. At that point, you're already not consistent, so I know it's gonna be uncomfortable, but it's still a recommendation from a sitting board of what we think is right for our county and our staff.
I think
Carter, you got any thoughts, or can you hear us?
Yeah, yep, well, that's a good point, Jody. I think, to my knowledge, we don't have another department getting anything different than 4%, other than the sheriff individually at this point. And then that's for different reasons, because of the black and blue, but,
You have a question?
and compensation for
There's other departments besides just the
recommendations
sheriff.
law.
Road department got a raise last year and this year.
That's cause they're
Yeah.
union,
Yeah.
they have a union
We
We're
contract,
talking only this year, we can only talk about this year.
and they're covered under a
We really
union
can't go
contract.
backwards.
But last year you said 0, Carissa got, emergency management got 4% last year after you said 0 and 4%.
Very different legal entity,
What's that?
They're a different entity.
they're a different legal entity, and we don't have a say over that.
So why do we have a board?
%? Do you guys, I guess, maybe change gears, but not really change gears? Do you guys have any thoughts or opposition to the adjustment for the certification that was talked about? I mean, that currently applies to the rest of our staff, so we.
that part I don't have a
I absolutely don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
No, I mean, that was something that was established and,
Yep, and the rest of
mean-
the staff will participate in that as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's going above and beyond and trying to advance a
Yep,
yeah,
career certification, no, if that, and that was,
it's
Something
not
that was-
reward the effort and work that's put into that, but.
and it's.
and it was
and it's-
agreed upon beforehand,
Well, yeah, and
that
it's-
that
it's-
is what they would get,
It's,
so.
it's clearly laid out in advance for the rest of the staff, yep.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
well,
I'm not, this isn't gonna help a thing, I apologize, but the conservation came in here the same way, they have a separate board, they probably recommended something different. We turned them around and sent them back out at 4%. I understand that your situation is special and that you're trying to attract talent and keep talent and
Our work schedule is totally different than the other county department other than law enforcement. You know, we work holidays, we work 7 days a week.
The sheriff's deputies, we have programmed in at 4% as well.
yeah.
everybody's,
So if we do this, what do I tell my board so I don't lose my 7 board members? Cause they're following the Iowa code that says their responsibility is to assess the needs of the county.
what do you suppose the Iowa code says about our responsibility? I'm not sure, but what do we suppose it says our responsibility is?
I'm sure it's to be diligent with tax dollars, which is the same as what they're
Pass
trying
a
to do.
balanced budget.
This doesn't affect your budget.
Yes, it does.
How?
Because it's still a county budget, it's still county taxpayers, tax dollars. it's still in our budget.
I mean, it is, but there's a separate levy that was voted on by the county. The county, when this was the dilemma of some of this is, there was a separate levy that we worked, from the start, Phil, when you told me to be on this board, I wish I'd have quit a long time ago, because it's been, the amount, and Kyle's been through part of it, and there's just been so much we've dealt with, but we worked really hard to get a levy passed, and it was a lot of the volunteers that helped get the levy passed. So there's a standing levy that we get X number, it's a special levy, it's not,
75 cents per thousand.
it was an extra vote that could change, it's not through perpetuity.
And that's enough to make it work, make all these raises work?
Yes,
Yeah.
and balanced budget and have a fund increase at the end of next
Fund
year.
balance is still going up, and that's where the way it's been managed and implemented has far exceeded expectations in every category. Financially, quality of service, on and on.
They're not, those increase, they're not affected by this HF 718 at all?
No, it's not,
It stays at 75 cents, but they get the full valuation increase?
correct. Which amounts to about $40,000 this year, but with the increase in dispatch costs for law enforcement center, that's gonna eat all the increase and a little bit extra, but it's been managed.
I'd like some explanation on the $60,000, I don't understand that, I'm not, I just don't understand it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, whether we dive into that now or not, either way, I don't care.
That's in the budget, Howard, but has not been approved
Yeah,
because we haven't gotten final documentations from the city of Algona.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with the city of Algona, but, I mean, what I don't understand, and this may not be the place, so tell me to shut up if I should shut up, and we'll move on, please, tell me.
It will be the place,
Well,
because when we get the actual numbers from them,
Yeah.
it's gonna come back to you guys to approve if we're
yeah,
gonna actually
go
pay
ahead
that or
and ask
not.
your question.
My question is, they arbitrarily set back and said, okay,
We wanna charge ambulance service 60,000 cause
So-
we're fielding their calls?
Well, to some degree, yes, but what it really, I guess the short version of it is, last year, they had asked when we were halfway, if not more, through the budget process, about increasing what the sheriff's office would pay, because the percentage of actual calls for the sheriff versus calls for the PD, it was based on a percentage split decades ago, and we haven't had an active valid agreement for over 15 years now, which most people probably didn't know, but that agreement has long since expired and been allowed to, we've just basically operated under the status quo. But they wanted to revisit those percentages, and then with that being said, they said, well, EMS is a county department now, and EMS was, they were figuring most of it was city of Algona before, so they considered that in their portion. Now they're saying it's a county entity, so you guys get to pay for that portion instead of us. We had some conversations with Roger, Phil, Derek, myself, and you were on a couple of those, I think, as well. But we met with Jacob Jaden and Bo Miller, and Roger presented his proposal for a structure that was based on call volume for each entity, sheriff, EMS, and city of Algona. And then we also talked about the financial contributions of E911, because E911 funds the equipment in the dispatch center. So the conversation of what was presented primarily by Roger and supported by the rest of us within the county was it should be broken down by percentage of actual call revenue. I mean, there's really nothing else to base it off of.
not call revenue, call volume.
Call volume, sorry.
There is no call revenue.
No,
right?
no, but call volume, and if you break down the calls, that's kind of where the dollars come from. So, but part of that was establishing a kind of joint group that would manage that operation instead of just the city of Algonah managing it. Cause that's currently how it is, we just write them a check and they handle everything else. And for the amount of calls that the sheriff's office and EMS, are involved in, there should be a team effort in that regard, so I guess that's kinda where the conversation was left, unless you guys have anything to add on to that, but that's kind of the short version of what we were discussing.
That's the gist of it.
And if we do these numbers, there's gonna be a change in control.
There needs to be.
Management of the dispatch center.
Be careful what we wish for, I don't, do you wanna control it? Or who wants
I
to?
want some input, I do not wanna control it in any way, shape, or form, but I wanna have some input.
Yeah, and I guess some of the reasons behind that are probably not for a today conversation, but yeah, that's where the numbers come from, is percentages.
But from my thought earlier, and I don't mean to redirect this again, but, alright, the first part of it was commenting on Jody's thing, if we were inconsistent at all in any other departments, well, that's a different story, but, and then we have been consistent, with the exception of individual sheriff, but, it was the second part to that, what I was gonna say was, is the fact that they are a different levy, and they don't, if we hand out a 6% raise to, you know, any other county department, that's gonna directly affect our tax levies for general and rural. If EMS is giving out a 6% raise versus a 4%, that's not affecting their tax levy at all. The citizens are not paying any more tax dollars based on those raises. So that's kind of I have mixed feelings on it, just cause yeah, I'd like to be consistent on across the board. I also understand where they're coming from and that this is not costing the Sioux County taxpayers any more dollars, and if they run out of those dollars, well, I guess that's management of that department that would have to answer for that. You know, or whatever the situation is there. So just my 2 cents there, I can see both sides there, but it is a separate levy and it's not costing taxpayers more dollars. In saying that, it's good to be consistent too, so.
And the flip side of that, I guess, to kind of piggyback off what you said is, the money that's collected is only there to support EMS, it doesn't go anywhere else. If it doesn't get spent on staff, it would get spent on something else, but either way, the funds are only for supporting emergency medical services, and I guess it is a little bit different in that regard. I mean, maybe more so like the conference board, which we were discussing before. Granted, we are one out of 3 parts of that for a board, but that has its own levy, specifically its own levy. We even talked about EMA, that it has its own commission, separate legal entity, but those funds still come from county general supplemental levy, which we set the levy rate for. So there's a couple different ways that it is different. And I think, I mean, to the point of consistency, I'm not gonna say it right now, but I think I think we have been consistent for the 4%, with one exception for a position that was not addressed with the wage scale stuff last year, and I can bring that up later, but, if we do 4%, that may be something we need to go back, talk about, that was one specific position. What do you guys think?
first one to speak loses, right?
Probably.
Well, you lost already then.
I'm not saying I'm relenting, I haven't made up that decision yet, but if you do, you guys best be there with the budget hearing and explain that, you know, that your taxes are going up, but they're not because of what we did, they're because of what you did, type of thing, you know, that.
And the difference with our levy, like you said, you know, our levy doesn't change.
No, but the valuation does, so their bill will go up,
Correct, but
the total bill will go
a
up.
big portion of our budget is income that we generate through call revenue. It's not just a tax levy. If we don't sustain that, or if we have a decline in calls, you guys could promote a 4% next year. We may have to go with a 2. It just depends on what our numbers are, because we have nothing to fall back on. You guys can propose a 4% levy and you can raise taxes to cover that. We do not have that option. So there could be a time in the future, you know, our budget is healthy. We've done due diligence on making our budget where it is. We have a $1 million fund balance sitting in there today. And we're only a year and a half old. We can cover this now. Next year may be different. These guys may have to make a tough decision for our staff next year and say, guys, we can only do 2. We have this dispatch center, we have this and this going on. We might only be able to do 2 next year, and that we may have to go different than what you guys do because of our separate levy.
Chances are, since you're not limited, and I only know enough, I know this excuse is not gonna last forever, that I'm new, but from what I do understand, that, you know, that you're not limited by the 718, so you have a chance, you might have a better chance of yours going up continually than we do.
Yeah, but your valuation is limited to what it can go up every year, so my levy only goes up a limited amount every year.
Yeah, and I guess, not that this is gonna be the magic silver bullet for this budget conversation, but the amount of revenue that the service generates right now, I think, as an advisory council, I think we feel relatively confident that we'll have that coming in. So I'm not concerned about that. But another thing that's maybe out there on the horizon, I mean, the state and federal levels, they're talking about updating prices for Medicaid, Medicare. Some of those, like at our National Association of County meetings, we've talked about legislative priorities. Last year, I highlighted it several times of it's incorporated in our NACO policies for advocating to continue treat in place and transport to alternative providers. They call it tip and tap. Those programs were rolled out during COVID. It actually saved the federal government, I think, $2 billion, but it actually would have put more money in the hands of services like ours that are rural, and providing some of those services that cost more money here than they do in the cities. So we also talk about GEMT and some of these other programs. Granted, this is looking at the genie in the bottle, but if some of those other sources of funding get brought up to, say, current standards or current actual costs, I would hope, and it would be my expectation, that if we can increase funding from, or funds coming in from actual calls, there would be a real possibility that we could drop the levy rate and lower the property tax burden for this particular levy, if some of those other situations come to fruition. Not saying they're gonna happen tomorrow, but there is a significant amount of conversation happening around those pieces of information. So, I guess, whether it's talking about higher raises for the sheriff with back to blue, or the pay of anyone in the healthcare field over the last couple of years, it's not comparable to a lot of other things. And I think while 6% is higher than 4%, it's a very fractional difference compared to other pieces of the world. And it is supported by the budget that we have.
Phil, you said something, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, I don't have the luxury of going back, but, so if I read this revenue side, you got 760,000 in revenue projected, is that correct?
Yes.
And then the bottom line is, you say total revenue of 2,142, so the rest is the levy fund, so what, 60% of the money is from the levy and 40% of it, give or take, some.
Give or take, yeah.
Change.
Yes.
Yep. So a little over half from the levy, yep.
And where did the 75-cent levy come from in the first place?
That was a voter approved levy.
I understand that, but where'd the 75 cents come from? How'd that level, where'd that come
The
from?
state, that's what the state allowed us to charge.
That's the maximum amount.
Yes, the state legislation that was proposed and passed into law gave the option to do a property tax levy up to 75 cents per thousand and an income surtax, which I don't remember how much.
1%.
Might have been on
Wasn't that much.
state stuff, but it was, yeah,
The
that was.
1% surtax amounted to about $142,000 if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to that number, that's pretty close. So when we did the vote, we opted to just do the levy only because we thought it'd be easier and less confusing to the public, and the 142,000 really didn't benefit us in addition to what we already had. Some of the neighboring counties did both because they were a smaller county, so they did both to try to get that money. And it was
That's
discussed.
an income surtax?
Yes.
It would have been on top.
State income surtax, so your state income would have been.
How does that, it doesn't matter, like, but the ship has sailed, but humor me a little bit, that would have been in addition to what, for the 3.8% flat tax now? For next year?
Yes, that
Yes.
would have been in addition to
Yes.
that,
Okay.
yep.
And when we looked at the numbers, we didn't,
That's
we
fine.
thought that this was more fiscally.
Yeah, so then the structure of it, once that was passed into state law, which we had actually had an advisory council before they required an advisory council, and I was around for all that, but the structure of it was, the board of supervisors made the decision to put that on the ballot in essence. So as a board, we acted to put it on the ballot, and then from there the voters decided, and we did some education, which.
We did 15 community meetings.
which was a lot, but we probably could have started earlier, and I mean, hindsight's 2020, we could have done a lot more education than we actually did, but I mean, we worked within the means of what we had and the knowledge we had at the time, so I think that number could have been higher than what it actually passed by. There's always gonna be people that vote on both sides of the coin for whatever topic, but I do think there's a number of people out there that were very opposed to it at the time that aren't quite so opposed to it right now, and I think that
Some of those
I think
are-
that says a lot.
Some of those are really opposed are now one of the biggest advocates we have.
So when you look at expenses, and again, you guys did this, but, when you look at insurance, actually going down, or from last year?
You're talking health insurance?
I assume, yes.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So So the very first year, when I did health insurance, I budgeted that really high. Cause I didn't know where we're at, we didn't have any history.
So 235,000 is gonna cover the
Correct.
new cost of insurance.
I went to lower that last year, and then when they changed everything to a 0% change, everything reverted back to the way I had it prior to that. But I'm comfortable with the 235.
Okay. Thanks.
And on the budget numbers, there's like Phil, there's other members of the group that are gonna take these tests and try to get up to the next level. We did budget for that already, so there won't be a surprise that 3 people are gonna become AAMT from EMT. It's
Right.
already figured into the budget, cause we kinda knew where they're at in the process. So the number might still be high if they don't pass, but we wanted to make sure it was in there anyway.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know if you guys wanna keep talking on this till we come up with a hard decision or roll through anything else. I mean, a lot of the rest of the stuff is fairly self-explanatory, supplies, equipment, some of that stuff, but I don't know if there's any questions on any of that or not.
The elephant in the room is the labor and the cost associated with labor, insurance, IFRS, social security, I mean, the rest of it's
Yep.
fairly, like you said, self-explanatory. And I assume supplies, I assume you bill out supplies, or if you use it, you bill it out, right, or wrong?
Well, I mean, it's not billed directly, but that's part of the revenue that we get back for the call revenue.
It's not billed directly?
I'm saying like, we don't charge for a bandage here in particular, it's,
You know,
it goes in your bucket of your call for service.
So we have a flat rate for ALS, a flat rate for BLS, a flat rate for critical care.
but
Then
it
we charge,
covers all those expenses.
yeah, then we
That's
charge
what-
mileage on top of that, but there's some equipment, some medications that we use that we charge on top. But your basic
Your
equipment
charging
that you
is
use
just not
within
itemized
is in
then.
that, yes.
Yeah, it's,
Yes.
Your charge,
yeah.
your charge.
But then the payments that come in are kinda like all the stuff at a hospital or whatever, they're all reduced
Reduced.
down and negotiated with insurance, so none of that's a foreign language, it just all factors in here together, yep.
Our supplies, there's 2 lines of supplies, one line of supplies is the office supplies, general building supplies, and then we have our medical supplies. Some of the medical supplies that we do get, we do supply the other services with, and then they reimburse us back the cost of those, so there is some of that happens as well.
Yep.
Again, it's pretty much a non-event financially, we can kick the can down the road and say we're gonna make a decision in 3 hours, or 3 days, or 3 weeks, but I don't see I don't see the future, it's, but I thought that, maybe we're moving too fast, I don't know. If we're gonna make the decision to go to 6% instead of 4%, or keep it at 6 instead of going to 4, depending on how you wanna look at it. Say today's the day to do it myself, but
Yeah,
I mean, it's a convincing argument, they're different.
they have an advisory board, their own,
Keep in mind,
Budget.
so does the assessor, so does county conservation, and so does.
Well, the assessor actually has
Their own
has
levy.
a separate
Government.
board, and we are 1/3 of that, and they have their own levy. Conservation has a board, but they do not have their own levy, they're supported with
I understand.
general fund tax dollars. So,
There are differences.
there are some, but
You can't
How-
put
how do
one
you
in
weigh
the same
those?
bucket as another.
yeah, how you weigh those factors is part of
The assessor is also not limited, I mean, they are, but not in the
Not by
same
House
way
File
of, it
718.
was not a voted on levy.
it, yep. And that's not limited by House File 718 either.
Correct.
And we're really not limited, but there's this general supplemental that we can go raise as much as we feel we can get away with.
The caveat with general supplemental is.
It can only be used for certain
It
things,
only have certain
but-
things.
yeah. So you just move more certain things than the general supplemental, I mean, we're,
Until you run out of things you can move, which we're probably not too far from that.
besides that, it's still increasing taxes, even though you can get away with it, it's still increasing taxes. And I'll be the first to admit, something's gotta go, the taxes have gotta go up, you know, if we're limited on the 718 on the, we can't even use our valuation increase to its full extent.
Right.
It's gotta come from somewhere, it does, it has to come from somewhere. No matter where we land, I encourage you to be at that meeting and defend the guy's the individual's new bill that's gonna show more money.
Yeah.
I'm not saying which way I'd vote today, right now, this minute, if we have a vote, I'll have to vote, but, I mean, it's a convincing argument. And this is not about me, but I went to the informational meeting in Algona, I think the second one in Algona that was at the UBC building, and I probably said it out loud there, I didn't like it, but I don't see the alternative. And I still don't. I think there's an alternative for the city of Algona, but I'm not sure there's an alternative for the Kossuth County, than a county-wide service.
I would agree with that.
And I guess,
And as a taxpayer in the city of Algona, excuse me, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I mean, I could argue that the savings they got out of, getting out of the ambulance service, they didn't pass back to me, so I could give it to you.
yeah. And I mean, in all reality.
We did give back what we had for EMS budget prior to this getting passed, so we did, the county did give back.
But the city
Tax dollars.
wasn't contributing actual tax dollars
Correct.
there, so that was one of the differences. And, I mean, as far as today, no, we're not doing an actual vote, it's just budget workshops and discussions, but we need a majority in some form to either tell Tammy to change things or keep them as they are presented, so. I guess I'm probably in a little bit of a unique situation here on the board, I was involved in this heavily, I mean, really before Phil was even a county employee, I was very involved in this from the board standpoint. I've been with this conversation in particular the whole way through the first advisory council and then the current one. So I do have a very hands-on knowledge of where we're at, what got us here, and that's some of the reasons I will say here or to anyone. I'm proud of where we're at and I'm proud of how it's been managed for a lot of those aspects. I mean, we've definitely had bumps in the road, everything does, but we've handled those situations and moved forward. And also to follow that up, I guess, that work or whatever isn't going to stop now either, like, it's not something that just happened in January or February for a budget workshop, so. I don't know how much more I can say.
Make a motion.
It's
Get
not a
a
time,
consensus, oh, so you're not gonna do it today?
it's not a time for a motion today, but I'll support keeping it at 6%, I'll say it.
I still have a hard time with it, just for the fact that we've been consistent with everything else, but I can really see the side of the fact that, it is a separate advisory board, it is a separate tax levy, that, it's, if they've taken the time to go through their numbers and everything, I just know what's gonna happen. If we do the 6%, we're gonna have people come back in here and say, well, why can't we get 6%, so then.
I have
openings. Huh?
I have openings.
Yeah,
Oh.
and it's very unique of how it's made up, because the city, or the state didn't, change, basically establish that the advisory council is the fiscal entity that sets the budget and votes on it there, and then similar to how EMA is set up is, the commission
No,
votes and,
mm-mm.
no,
I
I'm
just-
saying if they had
Oh.
set it up the same,
I
that would
thought
make.
that's what they did.
No, I'm saying if the state had set it the same to where it would be the similar makeup to how the EMA would, that would make our decisions here a little bit easier, cause it would be done for us, but it's. I'm on the fence about it. Carter, you got any thoughts?
That sounds like a hard pass to me.
Yeah, you don't get a pass.
No, you're saying I was passing to him.
Yeah,
'Cause
Okay, well,
I have a hard time,
I don't
yeah.
care, we'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I wanna know what's Carter think?
Carter, I'm not sure.
Well-
You're, oh, there you are.
Nope. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Citizens voted on a certain dollar amount to go towards EMS. And you're working within that dollar amount. If that's the best way to run the service, then I'd be open to the conversation of 6%.
We've had the conversation, it's time to make a decision.
Yeah, I know.
Mrs. Garmin?
I got nothing. Nope, nope. Nope.
no insight?
No. I think I'll refrain. Thank you.
Josh, I think you said it already, and it wasn't any benefit for me saying it again, but the abuse and the line of people coming through the door will be long and hard, you know, if we make a change. There's no doubt about it. Well, I don't think there's any, I don't have enough experience to say that. I imagine that's what's gonna happen.
Some will come back and some won't, but it's depending on the situation, but,
He who speaks first loses. I
I would
guess,
say,
go ahead.
well, I would say that for the sake of this year and everything that we've talked about so far in the budget discussions, it's not that I'm not supportive of higher wage increases, but I think 4% is the way to go. That's,
You've come down both sides of the issue so far, or what do you gotta clarify that for me, Carter, where you're at on EMS. Are you at 4% or are you at 6%?
I'm at 4. We had said we were gonna set everyone at 4, at the beginning, and if we got to the end and we felt that things looked differently, that we would have that conversation at the end, if we wanted to make any changes anywhere else, so. I guess I'll stick to what I said there at the beginning, and if we wanna have a conversation, if we're gonna go a different direction for different departments, then we can do that, but I'd say I'm at 4 for today.
Well, it's easy for me, I can go either way. I actually thought Carter was gonna say 6, and I was gonna say, well, I can get on board, I guess. But you know, we did say 4 all along, we've turned people back. I can be convinced either way. And that's too wishy-washy.
I'm in the same boat, Howard.
I think maybe one of the last things I'll say is, I mean, we are later here in the calendar, and we did say we'd come back and reevaluate things. I don't know if this is the time to bring it up or not, but, the sheriff's deputies, I think that should match, the deputies should match the rate that our sheriff's at. I mean, we were talking about having extra room in general basic, whether it's for grandstands or something else, and I think as far as staff goes, which does correlate here with EMS some, but emergency management had 4% last year, and this year, total of 8. Sheriff and deputy had 0 last year, EMS had 0 last year. I think the 7% figure for sheriff makes sense, I'm fully supportive of that, but I think at some point, whether it's now or later, I was gonna bring up that I think our deputies should be considered for a little bit more if we have flexibility. So, I guess that does tie in with the EMS 24/7 emergency status, and I think that has been on my radar for a bit, but I didn't wanna say it too early. And I think we're kinda at that point in the game where it could be discussed.
Well, that's just it, Kyle, and that was my first thought is, okay, we give EMS 6%. I guarantee the first people through the door are gonna be the sheriff's department and saying, well, we're a 24-hour service too. And how do you explain that?
And rightly so, and that's where I'm saying, if our sheriff is at 7%, the deputies below him are, granted, they're not the elected sheriff, they're not doing the administration, but they're very much on the front lines of that service, and I guess I would support changing from 4 to 7. I'd like to see the numbers, but I would very much entertain that for a conversation.
The only logic that I can apply to this is that it's their own levy. That's the only salvation. The insurance is going, I'm basing on the insurance is going up 15%, that's the number we're using. That alone is when you divide that out over everything, that alone is a 5% raise to the package, probably, spread. If insurance is $22,000 for an employee, and it's going up 15%, or if that is, maybe that reflects the 15%, that an employee's making 66, the 15% increase might be a 4% raise in their package, the way it is. I hear the 24-hour, but then the sheriffs say 24 hours, and then the engineers department says we're a double county, and so does the auditor, and so does the recorder, and so does the treasurer, and so does the assessor, and those, the only logic I can come up with to going to 6% is it's your own levy. I'm not saying I'm right, I'm saying that's the way I think. There's no holding back the flood if you alter. I mean, everybody's got an argument for why their department should be more. I'll complicate matters. I'll say that I can get on board with 6% for the ambulance service only, and the logic is that they need to attract talent, they need to keep talent, so I'll commit to that. I'll go there, I'll relent, I guess, and say, you guys do with it what you want. And I know we're setting up for abuse.
I'd like to thank the board for listening. Appreciate your thoughts, I do anyway. It's a tough decision for you guys, I understand that. It was a tough decision for us too, to get where we did. I just appreciate that. I hope you guys understand that what the advisory board sets is what we said we were gonna do, that we're gonna try to keep our service the best for the county within our budget. So that's what we're trying to do. And like I said, sorry, I gotta get back to work. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, I just know if we go 6%, I mean, our said we're gonna be opening the door and we're gonna have every department back in here saying we've got. You're talking matching the sheriff deputies with the sheriff up to 7.
I feel like that's something we need to look at.
I don't know that we can go that high.
I mean, we're already at 4, that's already figured in, so it would be 3% on top of what's figured in.
And that is gonna directly affect our,
General basic,
which we're looking at an increase this year.
we're looking at the increase on general basic regardless of.
Right.
Of that, we were talking at being at the limit, so.
And I know if I say 6% for EMS, I'm gonna wanna say the same for the deputies because they are 24-hour service, they are out there in the county, you know, dealing with stuff that we would be equipped to do with ourselves, but, yeah, it's.
Now this is maybe just quick math, but if you go in the sheriff's budget, the line item for uniform patrol services for deputies, 4% increase goes from 782,757 to 814,032. 7% would bring that to 837,549,550. So we'd be talking a $23,000 change, so.
Yeah,
I
then you
guess
gotta calculate in
you'd have
FICA,
FICA and
IFRS.
IFRS, but you're not gonna have a huge change off of that.
No, but then we're gonna have other departments in here saying, well, you gave 6% to EMS, you gave 7% to the sheriff deputies, as well as the sheriff, no, we want something more. And then how do we justify that?
Difference is, you have a state law that says we have an advisory board. I did not ask the advisory board for a 6% raise.
Right,
I gave them numbers.
right,
They assessed the county per the state law, says that what they were supposed to do. Coming with their recommendation to the board, that should hold some merit that it came from the board, advisory board, on their research. And I honestly don't know what I'm gonna go back to the board with if it's not approved. I don't know what I'll tell them. Cause you were at the last meeting, Kyle, you heard what they said.
I did, and that's not the driving factor behind what I'm saying here, but it is a factor, reality there, but that's not the sole reason for what I'm saying, I guess. I mean, we talked about putting money towards the grandstand from general basic, I guess. I'd rather have our sheriff's deputies match our sheriff for percentage than do something like that out of the general fund. But I guess that's just one of those things that's been on my mind for a while, and I hadn't said it yet, cause we weren't really towards the end when we talked about reassessing things. And maybe that's not a conversation right here, right now with Phil here, but it is something that I was going to bring up.
Well, I don't know if I sound wishy-washy, but I will support 6% for EMS.
I don't,
and I think for the sake of the advisory council putting in the work and everything and going through the budget and figuring in they can afford the 6% and to couple that with the fact that we need to maintain our EMS personnel and recruit new when we have those leave or advance, and that's not gonna be easy to do if we don't make adjustments. And
Maybe I'll add a final comment too, since seems we're at a stalemate here, of making decisions. I mean, I made my 4% recommendation or vote or whatever you wanna call it, based on the previous conversations we've had as a board, and that when we got to the end of all the wage discussions, if there was room, if seeing what our fund balances look like and all that, that we could potentially revisit things. And if it's the desire to revisit things, that's fine. But that was my reasoning for the 4%, was being consistent until we wanna have that conversation. I'll support and assist in defending whatever the direction the board wants to go. And like I say, I can see both sides of it.
looking at the 6% for them doesn't affect directly our general fund, and that's
Doesn't affect any fund, right?
just theirs.
only EMS.
So sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine, you're fine. If we're gonna look at it, might as well get started on it. I guess. Let's look at doing 6% for EMS.
Is there anything else in this budget you guys wanna talk on, or do we
No, I think
wanna
that was
talk
the,
on sheriffs or anything else in that regard?
Anything else that's coming out of the funds that we control, I think we better see where we're at the end before, I'm not saying I'm not gonna be willing to listen at the end, but right now, I wanna see where we're ending up.
yeah, I don't wanna go and say we're gonna give the sheriff's deputy 7%. Because we just don't know what that number looks like. And, you know, we're gonna have other departments coming in here saying, well, if EMS got 6, you're looking at potential for 7 for the deputies, what about my department? That's gonna open a whole floodgate.
Let's move on.
Okay. Anything else for that budget? Expenses, income, anything?
Do you have your FICA and stuff in there
Yes.
at that 6%? Okay.
It's actually, because we did the adjustments to the other help and to the full-time staff to add that extra person, those numbers actually show more than a 6% increase.
Yep.
Because we had to adjust for those increases.
Yeah, cause you're looking to go to 10 or 11,
10.
10.
And the other helpline, which is the volunteer part-time people, that just was figured incorrectly when we started the budget in '23. We've been red in that line since we started, and that's just to correct that line.
Okay.
But that's all figured into the FICA and NIPERS.
Okay.
Can I ask one real quick question not related to EMS before I go?
Sure.
When I did the ME budget, I asked about advertising for an extra person. Is it okay if I advertise for that, or do I need to bring the advertisement to you guys to approve? It doesn't affect the budget, it's just splitting it amongst more people.
I don't know, but
Should be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bud. Is there anything else you wanna look at yet today? Okay.
We still haven't looked at the insurance fund balance worksheet.
Oh, well, we got 13 minutes to forward. What do you guys want to do?
if everybody's prepared to do it, I'm all for staying and looking at it, if it's done, let's get it done. I don't care. I thought we had a meeting at 5 and we don't, so, but if you guys are in a hurry, whatever.
I'm not in a hurry.
Well,
That's having Doug come in, is he willing to do that, you think, at 13 minutes to 4?
you can ask.
For self-insurance fund,
Ask him, don't tell him.
Yeah.
Hey Doug, this is Josh up here in the boardroom. We just finished up with ambulance, are you going to have enough time here to go over that, fund balance worksheet, or is that something that you would rather, schedule for another day? It sounds to me like 4 o'clock, so that's not very long.
How much time does he have available?
How much time do you got available?
Tammy too.
I'm good. I have to be here till 4:30 anyway to lock up, so.
Do we wanna just have him come up? He said he's got until 4:35, so.
Okay, let's aim for
Okay.
that.
Yeah, you wanna just come up and we'll just try to hammer it out here, so. Alright, thanks.
Real quick.
I probably should too. We gotta get into this 10 minutes and decide I have to. They probably really wanted to know that, didn't they?
Yeah, probably. Top secret information.
I'm sorry.
Thanks for coming in last minute, Doug.
Sure.
Do you need the screen pulled?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Here's a sheet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Got your big glasses on?
I got my good glasses on, and my latest ones on.
I just got a new pair yesterday, but I wasn't gonna wear them today, I gotta get used to everything looking through them. Start tonight. Okay, are you guys ready, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So this table here is information that we have been compiling over many years. And the top of the table has history over here on the left, and then there's the current year, what we're working with, and then we got budgeting on the bottom. And if you go across the top there, you'll see where we have estimated health insurance costs. That's from 06, 07, where we had estimated suggested contributions for singles of $342 and $856 for family. And our estimated maximum liability was $412 and for a single, and $1,000 for a family. Have what we had for expected total claims. In 14-15, we started putting in the administrative costs and our estimated suggested rates then, and the estimated maximum fund liability. In the green there, those columns, that's has to do with what we actually had for revenue. So you can see in 07, fiscal year 7, we had 16 singles, and the cost to the county was $524, and we had 99 family, and the cost that we were contributing for that was $1,080. And then the expenditures, there have been some columns for these expenditures that I hid because it just made everything too busy. When you start, if you start adding up some numbers in, you see that the total expenditures are off by a few $1,000s. It's because I hid some of that stuff, and the figures are actually in there, and those total expenditures are correct, but they're just not showing up. But you can see what we actually paid, the Wellmark invoice, administrative fees, audits. That's some things that we do at the end of the fiscal year, and wellness programs, which wellness screenings, immunizations, those types of things. So you can see what our total expenditures have been. In 2024, we had total expenditures of $3.2 million. The year before, it was $2.4 million. The revenue for that same year was 2.6 million. The year before, it was right around 2.3. And then in the blue, there's the balances. So when you look at the auditor's balance, you can see where we have been in the past going up to the previous fiscal year. And if you go through everything in the current year, you can see where we're right now with our auditor's balance, we're at $2.5 million. So that's kind of the history, what we're doing currently. And then for budgeting purposes, contributions, the fiscal year 25 actual is $845 per single is the contribution, and family is $2,075. Suggested by Blue Cross, they suggest that we should be contributing $979.24 for a single, and for a family, $2,448. And then for the maximum liability of the fund, suggested to cover all of that, it would be $1,152.18 for the single, and $2,880 for the family.
Okay, you lost me about 3 paragraphs back. I was with you when you were at the 845 and the
Yeah.
and the 2075, and then you lost me.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry.
Those on the Wellmark provided information for the same policy that we are
Yeah,
receiving.
is that,
this
but those numbers you went on, are they here?
Yeah,
somewhere?
those numbers are what is taken off of this
Yeah,
salary.
but are they on here?
Yeah, that's what I just read, that fiscal year 26, if we were to use suggested, what Wellmark suggests for us,
And where is it on here? That's
it's
where-
right underneath that fiscal year 25 actual.
Bottom left corner.
The red
Fiscal year
bar.
25,
Okay, that's
right
the
there
part, okay.
is where I'm at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, the single for suggested is $979.24. The family, what Wellmark, suggests is $2,448. If we were to be budgeting, in trying to budget for the, maximum liability to the fund, Wellmark suggests that we would use $1,152 for the, suggested, for single, and family is $2,880. So our estimated liability, we know we're gonna have administrative costs, which is $864,105. That would be a gross figure using 43 single policies and 83 family policies. The negative numbers, for the percentage, that's just looking at the dollars that would be collected. That has nothing to do with the rates. That's just looking at the gross dollars. I really should remove that. If we were to, for the 100% of what they say for, we should be contributing, we should contribute $2,079.49, $2,079,490, and for the maximum liability for claims, we should be collecting $2,599,348.
Are
If you-
those percentages from last year's figures?
That's just looking at gross dollars. Those are lower gross dollars than what last year's were, but that's because we have fewer policies than what we
Okay.
had. So when you multiply fewer policies times their rates, you get a lower gross dollar.
So to calculate that back, you'd have to figure a dollar per policy and
Correct.
back that in.
Right. Which is, if you really wanna look at that, in the cyan, right here, this, first one, the estimated suggested contribution is 912, and they're saying now it's 979 for this year. And the same thing with the family, and then the, estimated max liability, so. So then, if you look at this right in here, I can take and just, put a variable amount in and see how it affects our fund by looking at these bottom lines. Or you can put a constant adjustment in the yellow and see how that works. The pink down here is if we do not change anything in contribution. The blue is variable, which are these figures right in here. And the yellow is the constant, and that's these figures right here. If you move over to the right on this side, I try to estimate an ending balance. We actually ended last fiscal year with a $2.6 million balance. I think we're gonna end this year with somewhere around the 2.3, 2,300,000, and I used ending balance, estimated, I think I used 2,354,000, that's as if we used 100%. And if you put that in, no change at all, we would end up with an estimated balance. And if we had what Wellmark says will be our 100%, we would have a estimated ending balance of 1,900,000. If we have a maximum liability, we're gonna be 1,400,000. In cyan, if we adjusted that for a 15% increase, we would end up with an estimated ending balance of 2,304,000. And if we just use the constant adjustment in the yellow, I would estimate that we're gonna have about $269,000 balance at the end of next fiscal year, the end of fiscal '26.
Doug, for the constant adjustments in yellow that you got there, where did you get the 975 and 2350 from?
Well, we talked about a 15% increase and we rounded those 971.75 and 2386.25
Okay,
to
so
those.
the only difference
constants.
between blue and yellow is rounding?
Yeah, the yellow is kind of what, we started to use for our budgeting.
Yeah, that's what you guys came up with for
Okay,
the
Yeah,
figures to
15%
use.
made for a really
Yes.
odd number to
Correct.
budget with, yeah.
and the 2350 includes 250 paid by employees?
Yeah, that'd be everything that gets put to the self-insurance.
Okay, so the county would be paying 21. Right?
I'm just talking about insurance fund here, so I
Yeah.
don't look at what I look at the whole contribution and not where it's really coming from.
So the balance at the end of '24 was the 2611, right?
Correct, 2,611,000.
And our estimated 25 is,
I think it's gonna be right around 2.3
I
million.
see that, I'll make sure I understand. And then if we go with this yellow plan, the estimate is it's gonna drop another $30,000 or $40,000, whatever it is.
Right,
And that's just a scientific wild ass projection.
it is,
Yeah, I
slight,
understand, I understand.
absolutely, this
So-
is no,
Yep, it could be higher, could be lower.
could be higher, could be lower, yeah.
I understand. So, is everybody, is it another consensus thing, or do you give a recommendation of what you think we should do, or do we just all get there together?
But I think we
Well-
already gave the 15% for, and I don't know, cause I think you pretty
For
much
budget
agreed,
purposes, right?
yeah,
And that's,
Yeah.
and that's the yellow or
Yeah,
the,
what has always been,
what?
the question is what should that auditor's balance be? And you gotta look at the, to me, it's a kind of a function of what your costs are. And I don't have an answer or anything, but you can't really just say it's supposed to be 2,500,000, cause every year with costs
Costs go up,
increasing,
sure.
you've got to keep that balance increasing.
If health, theoretically, in a perfect world, if health costs are up 6%, you should go from 2.5 to
Right,
2.7 or
Right.
whatever it works out to be.
and the absolute minimum, I mean, if we were to, have a maximum, have some sort of a situation where the maximum liability to our fund would be, would be seen, we wanna make sure that we would have our contributions, let's see, the maximum liability to the fund minus our contributions, that's the absolute minimum that your auditor's balance would be, because that's gotta cover that. The only problem with that is, the next year, you know you are going to, you're gonna have to raise your
Right.
rates, your contributions quite a bit, because you will not have any balance. So, you wanna have a balance that's healthy enough that can cover you, but yet, in the next couple of years, you don't necessarily have to raise your contributions a bunch.
It's easier to maintain a balance versus
Sure.
rebuild it.
No different thing going on a credit card.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
So the question that's never been answered is, what should our balance be? And we're getting to the point where, our maximum this year, we're gonna be 2.6 plus 800. We're gonna be running around that $3.5 million, and we're collecting, our total revenue will be about 2.8, 2.9, just call it. So we're gonna be about, 700,000, if we would take 700,000 from our balance. We're getting where it's close, closer than what I feel comfortable with. And that's why, I guess if we go 15%, I feel pretty comfortable with that. If we go 15% increase on our contribution to the fund, which is what we,
Which is in the,
Budget
which is
for.
pretty much in the yellow, and or the aqua.
right, yes.
So way over on the left in the red box is the fiscal year actual, what we're doing is 845 for single and 2075 for family.
That's right now, yes.
And anywhere in this, so the fiscal, in that same box, fiscal year 26, 100% is adjusted, is 979, which of course is close to 975, but the 2448 is more than the 2350, right? How do I jive that together?
That's just looking at that's what Wellmark,
That was Wellmark's number over
yeah,
there.
Wellmark's number is suggested.
And the 15% gets you the 23, in the area of the 23.
Yeah, 20, above, we had 2075.
Yep, I understand.
And the 15% gives us right around that 23,
Okay.
80, 23, 90.
You're right.
Is there a reason we rounded up a little bit on single and down $35 or $36 for family?
I don't remember exactly what.
Point is, you could round it up to 2,400 easily, right?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean,
And that's only gonna, so, I know this isn't subject of the day, or maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but, so. They're suggesting a rate in order to keep our fund balance good. What's, is it on here what our insurance would be if we didn't self-insure, or is that somewhere else totally?
Well, she handed us,
Yeah, I no doubt. I have.
Michelle
Yeah, I'm
gave
sure
us that
sure.
information. Enough, I need that right off.
That's fine, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I remember it was higher, but I can't remember exactly how much, Alan.
yeah, I would say the same thing, I know it was higher, but
Yes.
I don't remember the figures top of my head.
When you say higher, you're saying higher than the 2,350 or the 2,400 or the 2,386, right?
Yeah, it was higher than the rates that we got plugged in.
Yeah, I understand, I think.
You wanna think about suggesting any other rate, or are we gonna stick with that 15% that we set it at?
If they're comfortable with the 15%, I mean, it's going down a little, and there's a chance it would go up, I mean, based on the projection, it's going down a little. You don't like that, but there's a chance, to see where you're at, and.
Yeah, the
and you're-
crystal ball, you could tell us for
Right,
sure.
absolutely, absolutely, right, this is more than a guessing game, right? It's a comfort level and a guessing game, and so there's more than one variable, and, I guess. I can settle there. Doug said he was comfortable with that, and I heard you too, believe me, if we go down, then we got a bigger problem.
Mhm.
But, I mean.
Carter, you got anything to comment on?
Oh, not in particular, I'm following the conversation, but
Good thing you are, if I was at home, I'm not sure I would be.
Yeah, I'm sure it's easy to follow the spreadsheet when you can't see it.
well, that's just it. That's why I say I'm following the conversation, not the spreadsheet.
Yeah,
This is kind of a crappy thing to say, if I was at home, I'd say, I'm more conservative, this, I wanna see it go up a little bit, and like I alluded to that a little bit last week, we're doing an HSA right now, and we're not using it, you know, we're just building, well, we haven't had any serious claims, we're just nickels and dimes, you know, so we're being conservative at home, but I've said it many times already, the world of difference between your home and the county and what you do, I understand that, so, I mean, I'm willing to, I don't know what it means as far as moving money from A to B and C to D. The 15%, like he said, is the 2386, if you wanna round up instead of round down, it's gonna give you, it'll make $2,000 or $3,000 difference, you know, it's more than that, but you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that if claims are less than
It'll go up on its own.
the money is gonna be in that fund for next year,
Right.
because it may reduce what next year's contributions will be.
Yeah, and we never really
It's-
do the same contribution year to year, as you can see, you know, 5, drop 12, 0, drop 15, 4, 4, 5, you know, so you can see it changes every year, we're not steady on what we contribute to that every year.
You're talking about percentages, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's based a lot on what the previous year, how it shook out.
well, yeah, I mean, look at 1920, there's 20% put in there, and then 2 years later in 22, 0% contribution was made, because there was enough of a fund balance there that it stayed healthy enough to contribute that.
I'm comfortable with it,
Yep.
you can't go any lower.
No.
And what you said about, you know, probably the balance should probably trend up with increasing costs, I mean, that's a fair statement to make too. I mean, you can go all the way back to the beginning there and they were at 1.8 and say, hey, we're not as bad, it's not as bad as it once was, but if you add in the doubling of health insurance costs or whatever it was in that time, you're way underfunded, so I mean. What do you want? You want more of a number, or you wanna say that we're gonna settle there?
Nope. Nope. I mean, consensus sounds like 15% is where we're gonna stick, so.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right,
All right,
as good as anything, right?
well, it'd be nice if it,
Costs went down?
yes, it would
Oh,
be
sorry.
nice.
I'll put out a bet the costs are not gonna,
No.
Well,
percentages aren't gonna go down, our costs could go down easily.
it could,
Well, they
yes.
could go up.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Doug.
Doug.
Thank you.
Alright. Do we wanna discuss anything else budget wise, or
What's left?
we don't really have anything else on the list for today?
What's left off the list for next week?
Wow.
Well, right now, all I have to change is ambulance, right? And that should be all.
Until next week.
I heard you.
Well, in fairness to the auditor, we need to be getting done.
Yep.
Finishing up.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by
Second.
Haas, second by Garmin, adjourn, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carried unanimous, we are adjourned at 4:22.